Good evening. The City Council meeting will begin shortly. Thank you for your patience.
Here we are again.
Yeah. You guys have a lengthy close.
Hey, Richard Bloom. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Assemblymember Bloom.
Good evening.
Let's start my video here. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like we're all here. City Clerk, are you present?
I am present and we are ready to go.
All right. So good evening. It's Monday, May 4th. It is 6:56 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. We shall now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
to the
flag
of the United
States
of America
and to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty and justice
for all.
for all. Thank you very much. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Duran,
Here.
Councilmember Heilman, Councilmember Meister,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath,
Here.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes. All
We have a
right.
quorum.
Thank you very much. May we have a report of the closed session agenda, please?
Yes, good evening. The City Council convened a closed session at 6 p.m. this evening. There were no members of the public for public comment. The council discussed the two items on the posted agenda, took no reportable action, and adjourned the closed session at approximately 6:50. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And regarding the approval of the agenda, are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Mayor, staff would like to continue item 4C, which is the consideration of closure of West Hollywood Park, and continue that item to the next meeting on the 18th. And also a note for the city clerk, if she could remind me, we are likely going to have a heavier than expected agenda. And at the end of this meeting, we're going to discuss starting both the closed session and the regular council meeting at an earlier time.
Next time, yes. Okay. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda from the city council members? Sean Duran.
Mayor, how about can we put item 5A, which is an amendment to the agreement with ChargePort on electric vehicle stations? Can we move that to consent?
Without objection?
I have a comment on that, but I can make it under council member comments.
Okay. And I would like to pull items 2I, which is about the events, and 2P, which is about the AIDS and COVID panel. Any other changes?
I'm going to try. Item 4B, state legislation, priorities from staff.
There's too much to discuss.
Okay. Well, we happen to have one of our state legislators here, so perhaps you can give him a preview of what we'll be talking about later. All right.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Council Member Meister. May we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Councilmember Duran,
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman,
Aye.
Councilmember Meister,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath,
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes. All right. We have an agenda. Are there any adjournment motions this evening? Councilmember Horvath, I think you're mute.
I'm
Oh,
unmuted
you are
now,
good.
I think.
Yes, you are. You are.
Okay. So I have a couple of adjournment motions, Mayor. First, I would like to adjourn in memory of Nick Sanderson, who is a former mayor of Pomona, New York. Before becoming mayor, Nick served as a trustee and deputy village mayor. He was the president and CEO of Flare Gas Corporation and was married to Leslie Sanderson and had two daughters, Lindsay and Kimberly, and a son, Jonathan, a stepson, Jared, and is a relative of one of our West Hollywood residents, Moss Cribben. So we extend our condolences to Moss and his entire family. Next, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Keith Stanisewski, who was involved in many social circles in the West Hollywood LGBT community. He had a disability, but he never let it stop him. He was relentless to live life to its fullest, and his friends remember him as the most kind and genuine person. He was also sassy and knew how to throw a good zinger, and he is missed by all of the boys in West Hollywood who called him a friend. And I'd also like to adjourn in memory of Martin Avart Lewis, who died on April 16th at the age of 89, served in the US Navy, retiring at the rank of lieutenant commander. During those years, he taught marine engineering at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. He continued teaching as a college professor in the years after his naval service. He loved square dancing and traveling with his wife, Patricia, and he also loved woodworking, photography, and gardening. He is survived by his wife, Patricia, his son, Brian, and daughter-in-law, Julie, and two grandchildren. And finally, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Nancy Block, who is the grandmother of Janet Jimenez, our city's assistant to the city manager. Nancy passed away soon after her 89th birthday. She was a wonderful cook and lover of the arts, and her family is comforted knowing she's been reunited with Richard, her love of 69 years. We extend our condolences to Janet and her entire family. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other adjournment motions? Then I would like to just take a moment and adjourn in honor of my dear mother, who passed away. She lived 90 years of life and was an extraordinarily optimistic woman who lived through an amazing time in America. And she died of coronavirus, one of the 50,000 who had died by the time of her death. And I wish my family and everyone who knew her, well, I would say, first of all, that the members of this community have said such beautiful and amazing things to me on her behalf. And I send you all much thanks. And I wish her a speedy trip to spend the rest of eternity with my father, wherever that might be. So thank you very much. On another note, I just want to say, I believe Abby's mother passed away when she was the mayor, and John Duran's mother passed away when he was the mayor. So Lindsay, you better call your mother and tell her you love her before you become the mayor next week.
Well, she is listening, so she just heard you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. With that said, we'll move to presentations, which brings us to Assemblymember Richard Bloom. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a bit of, maybe we're setting some precedent here of having our elected officials that represent us in state and federal offices join us for these meetings remotely. And I think it's a really great thing that we're doing, and I hope we can continue doing it through the summer and perhaps beyond. So Assemblymember Bloom, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I hope we'll be able to do this in the future too. It's a little bit strange that there are so many things that we're doing now. It took a pandemic to make them happen. I think one thing is that the pandemic has brought the entire world together in unity in many ways, even though there are still many things that divide us. We have this disease in common, and it has forced us to grapple with combating it in unison. That hasn't happened in a perfect way up until now, but I think we can hope that that it will get better. Mayor D'Amico, let me begin by thanking you for inviting me to address the council and the members of the public who are listening or watching this council meeting. But let me first add my condolences to you on the passing of your mom. It's difficult to lose a parent. I've lost both of mine, and I have to believe doubly so given the circumstances where it's difficult to mourn, difficult to gather with friends and family, and so you have our deepest sympathies, and hopefully the solace and the embrace of your community will help get you through this time. Also want to congratulate incoming Mayor Horvath. I hear now that it's a week in advance of the swearing in, so it's right around the corner for you, and of course Mayor Pro Tem Heilman as well. Mayor D'Amico, you've had quite a job over the last couple of months, one that you never could have anticipated, even though we've read a lot and watched a lot of TV shows and movies about pandemics. I don't think anybody ever really believed that this could happen, and here we are precipitously in this extraordinary time. Mayor Horvath and incoming Mayor Horvath and Mayor Pro Tem Heilman, you'll have your hands full dealing with this, but you're both veterans of the City Council, and I know that the entire council will join you in helping to get through what will be at every level of government a struggle for us over the coming months. Your budget, the budget of the cities on the west side, the state budget, the federal budget, we are all in a state of calamity right now. These are times that will challenge us to rise to the occasion, and I know that all of you will. I've just returned to Sacramento. It's not my first trip back. There have been 2 committee meetings over the past couple of weeks that I've attended, but I'm here with all of my colleagues now. We've been brought back into session after essentially being locked down in our districts for the past 7 weeks. Most of us, including myself, I think have used that time to meet with constituents and address constituent issues and be out in the community as much as you can when you're not supposed to be outside of your home. But of course, we've taken advantage of the technology, the same technology that you're using here in your meeting tonight, and have reached out to many people. I want to talk a little bit about what we're facing here in Sacramento. But I want to first acknowledge the efforts of my staff in working on behalf of our collective constituents. My district director, Josh Kerpies, and you all know these folks, and many of you who are watching the meeting have had the occasion to be in meetings or perhaps meet my staff. But Josh and Tim Pershing, Aditi Shakarwar, Melissa Koffler, and Sebastian Lozano have all been working overtime addressing many issues that have come up. Chief amongst them, I have to say, have been difficulties that people have been having receiving their unemployment benefits from EDD. I'll have more to say about that in a few minutes, but suffice it to say that I'm very grateful for the work that my staff is doing that is helping our constituents. Well, as I already said, the situation in Sacramento is pretty bleak, both on the legislative front and the budget front. Let me start with legislation. We've been encouraged to cut back on our bill packages that we just began a few short months ago. And so only essential bills are going to be moving through the legislative session this year. I pared back my bill package from what was around 25 bills, just under 25 bills, and it's now 9, and I'm sure that will be a further winnowing process. I think you're going to see a focus on bills that in some way address the COVID crisis. Wildfire is still an issue that we need to be concerned about. Homelessness and housing, as always, will be topics of my legislation. And similarly, in the budget, we are facing, because of the same circumstances that you're facing that are affecting your budget, the diminution, the real truly a calamity with sales tax and all of the other revenue sources that we rely on in the state of California have cratered. And as a result of that, we are facing a $40 to $60 billion budget deficit that has recently been estimated by some. We are fortunate in that over the past 6 years, we've built a historic budget surplus, cash reserve of $21 billion. That's going to disappear very quickly, unfortunately, but it will help cushion the blow. The reduction in revenue is going to have an effect on city and state services. I've been through this before, but with the Great Recession, I know Councilmember Duran, Councilmember Heilman, you've also experienced this, and we will rely on our experience to help us get through a period of time that will outstrip anything that we saw in the Great Recession, anything that we've seen in the past. Many are comparing this to the Great Recession, to the Depression of so many years ago that our parents talked about. And here we are facing this. The Depression happened over a relatively lengthy period of time compared to the downturn that we're seeing, which is immediate and fast. I like to be optimistic, and it was Tim Cook last week, the CEO of Apple, who said that he thought that this economy was going to be V-shaped, a very steep decline, followed by a very steep return to a healthy economy. I hope that's true, but it's going to take all of our work to help make that happen. one similarity that I think we do have to the Great Recession, and that we can rely on our experience and our recollection, and work our way back. And that is, I think that the West Side cities, in many ways, are going to be at the leading edge of the recovery. And that's because we had a very sound economy and a growing economy before this happened. And as we return, the fundamentals of those economies are still there. The film industry, the hospitality industry, the tech sector, all of these things are very strong in our area. And we need to focus on those areas and make sure that they come back with strength. And that will be the leading edge of a recovery that I hope will be as swift as possible. Let me talk for a few minutes about the situation with unemployment benefits. As I said, my staff has really been working nonstop since March 17th on constituent casework, and the number one issue has been responding to folks who have not been able to get any or all of their EDD benefits. Let me first address why it's taking so long to and why it's taking so long to respond to constituent issues when people first contact the EDD, and then sometimes it seems like there's nobody there at all to answer questions. And the fact of the matter is, prior to the COVID-19 crisis, the economy was good, unemployment was low, and during low periods of unemployment, EDD staff levels are similarly very low. And to receive unemployment insurance, you must have been an employee, and your employer, of course, then pays into the system, which covers your benefits when you become unemployed. In about a week, millions of Californians lost their jobs or had their hours reduced. And as a result of that, Congress created the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that sort of mirrors the unemployment insurance program, but it's an entirely new program, and we simply were not ready for either of these things to happen. In the first 4 weeks of the 2008 recession, by comparison, EDD processed 375,000 unemployment insurance applications. And in the first 4 weeks of the Safer at Home orders, EDD processed 2.7 million applications. And as of last Thursday, that was 3.7 million applications. Prior to this crisis, EDD received about 2,500 applications a day. And now, last Tuesday, 235,000 unemployment applications, 190,000 of which were for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. As of last week, over $6 billion in unemployment claims had been distributed, but 47% of applications have either been denied or delayed, and it's unclear how many of those denials are appropriate. And we're sorting through those literally one application at a time. So EDD has now increased their staffing levels. They've cut down on a lot of the confusion. As of April 28th, you can apply for either unemployment insurance or the PUA assistance by having a single application. So things are much improved now. Many people had applied for unemployment insurance benefits prior to April 28th, thinking that they were applying for the other program, and that only added to the confusion. Unemployment insurance, again, is for those who are employees that have lost their jobs, and pandemic unemployment assistance, PUA, is for self-employed, independent contractors, freelancers, and others who are not eligible for unemployment insurance. So if you receive either UI or PUA benefits for any of the weeks between March 29th and July 25th, then you're going to receive an additional $600 per week. That's a big deal for people who are without income today. But we need to make sure that people are able to access those benefits. If you lost your job or you had your hours reduced as a result of COVID-19 layoffs, staying home to take care of the kids, staying home to take care of someone who's ill, then because you're high risk, and you've applied to EDD and something's wrong, but you've been unable to contact EDD to help you, I want you to do two things, please, in this order. First, go to the EDD website and read the new, and this was posted on Monday or Tuesday of last week, Unemployment Benefits Guide. That will help answer most questions. If you still have questions after that, go to my website. That's www.asm.ca.gov/Bloom /Bloom. Again, that's ASM, M as in Mary, .ca.gov/Bloom, and use the friendly Contact Richard button, and my staff, you'll be able to leave information about how to contact you. My staff will contact you and try to provide assistance. Now, it may take a couple of days because the influx of complaints has been very significant, and it is taking us some time to get back to people. But we do get back to everyone who leaves us a message. So I want to conclude by complimenting your leadership, that of your city manager. You should know that I'm in touch with many of you on a regular basis. I have a weekly telephone conference with the city manager. So I'm very up to speed on the things that are happening in and around the city of West Hollywood. We are going to be looking at a different world in the post-COVID-19 world, and we should start preparing for that now. And I look forward to working with you, with your staff, with your community, with every one of the wonderful residents, constituents that we share in the city of West Hollywood, towards looking towards a brighter future. I hope that happens soon. It's going to be a lot of hard work. There's going to be a struggle involved, but with patience and with creativity, we will get there. And I look forward to the future with you. Thank you very much for giving me a few minutes to talk to you about what's going on up in Sacramento and how we can provide assistance.
Absolutely, and thank you for coming. I don't know if my colleagues have any comments. I did just want to say that a couple of people on our staff wanted me to thank you and your staff, specifically Josh and Guy, for being so available to constituents, residents of the city, and to our city staff as they ask questions and try to get answers. And certainly the EDD description you just gave in terms of the millions of people they're helping is critical. And as you answer questions from my colleagues, if you could also sort of talk to our housing crisis and our homeless efforts, because we certainly all see the possibility that this crisis could make that crisis even worse. But I want to give my colleagues a chance to ask questions as well. Lauren?
Thank you. Hi, Richard, and thank you for everything that you're doing up in Sacramento. We appreciate it. A couple of things, and maybe these are comments more than questions, but regarding the EDD, I think the biggest frustration is the fact that you never can get anyone on the phone. I mean, I understand there are hundreds of thousands of calls happening, but the message even is disheartening, because it says, okay, here's another number for you to call because we're just going to give you information, and then we're going to hang up on you. And then you call the other number, and that is the same message. Basically, we're going to just give you some information, you're on your own, and we're hanging up on you. So that's just to give you from the perspective of a caller, what's going on.
I know it's very, very frustrating, and I get regular reports back from my staff about how appreciative people are merely by the fact that we returned a phone call and they're able to talk to and communicate with a human voice. Even if we can't work out their problem, they appreciate the
Because
content.
sometimes it's just a question that is not answered in the booklet. So, and you do need to speak to someone. The other comment I have is I just got an email today from one of our small business owners. And as you know, the city of West Hollywood, our main businesses are hospitality, restaurants, bars. And the concern,
Oh, you bet, I
the
know.
concern is that how are they going to come back in any way that you know, not knowing, first of all, when the you know, when the recovery period will be, but also if things are going to be done slowly, it's not that easy to have, say, a bar at half staff, having the social distancing, having the masks. You know, that's going to be extremely difficult to control. And what the businesses are saying is we don't even think we can do that because our employees aren't going to want to work part-time. They're better off just getting unemployment if they can get through. And so I just hope that Sacramento is thinking about how we realistically can bring back when it's going to be safe, knowing that there could possibly be, you know, wave 2 in November. They're worried about even, you know, liability of being open. So those are just some concerns from the small business perspective.
Thank you for that comment. It is indeed tragic. The last decade or so, perhaps even a little bit longer, has seen a diminution in size of restaurants and cafes. The model cafe today is more crowded, it's more lively. This is doubly true in West Hollywood. And unfortunately, that model may not work well for a future in which we need to continue to maintain some distance. I know that this is an issue that many in the industry, really in all industries, are looking at very closely today. I think that the issue you identified, council member, the main reason that the governor left restaurants and bars out of his phase 2 opening announcement today. If you're not familiar with that, and you know, many folks may just be learning about it, Governor Newsom announced today that certain businesses that comply with a certain amount of social distancing and masking and other criteria will be allowed to open as of this Friday. Now, the specific criteria will not be formally released until Thursday. So there won't be a lot of lead time between Thursday and the day when the actual opening is allowed. But I think we will see a process under which some businesses start to open. But again, restaurants are not the only group that is not on the list of those types of businesses that will be able to open, but they are specifically not in the initial group. This is a big problem. How we go about doing this, of course, is important to public safety. And so it's important that we get it right and get it right the first time.
Thank you.
Please, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Richard, for being part of our meeting today. While we know you hail from Santa Monica, you have roots in West Hollywood, and you've certainly represented us well, and we really appreciate that. I have 2 questions. One is really about securing funding in the next stimulus bill for states and small cities. As I know, we all know, and we're all familiar with, small cities like West Hollywood have not yet seen our piece of what the federal government is trying to offer in terms of support. And we're trying to make sure that we're included in that next bill. We'd love your help and want to know how you intend to help us make sure we have a voice in that conversation. And then the other question I have, of course, related to our local economy, we know that welcoming people to West Hollywood is a big part of how we make sure we provide the services that people have come to rely on in the community. So as we think about California being a safe place for people to come and what that looks like, how do you foresee us welcoming back visitors to partake in our hospitality industry and our tourism economy? Thank you.
Two great questions. First of all, I'm all in when it comes to making sure that the federal government is funding not just large cities over 500,000, but also smaller cities under that number. And it's of extreme importance. I know that Congressman Schiff was your guest a week or two ago, or a meeting or two ago, and that you're advocating with him, and that he's fully on board. As you know, Council Member, 5 of the 6 cities that I represent are under 100,000 in of residents, and the crisis, of course, is being felt by every city, not just the large cities, not just the small cities. Everybody is affected by this, including counties that we have around the state. And we have some counties like Modoc County in Northern California has only 9,000 residents, but they are feeling the pinch. It's all relative, right? But everybody's revenue is down, and this is a crisis for everyone. So I will be advocating on your behalf and doing everything possible we can do to help. And at the same time, trying to make sure that actions that we take in Sacramento do not inadvertently hurt local cities. Again, going back to the Great Recession, there were a good many things that happened in Sacramento that local governments, which I was the mayor of it at the time in Santa Monica, we weren't happy about. Some of those were probably unavoidable, but I'd like to think that we can do a better job this time around than we did then. And so I'll be on the lookout for those opportunities. And frankly, this is going to move very quickly now. Our initial budget in Sacramento needs to be completed by June 15th. Our process is going to be short. It's going to go by very, very quickly. There are going to be very few budget hearings. As you know, I chair one of the 5 budget subcommittees, and we're going to have one hearing instead of the multitude of hearings that we normally have. So I know that your staff and each of you as council members will be looking very carefully at this budget as it moves forward. So that will happen as of June 15th. That is going to be a, for lack of a better expression, a budget to keep the lights on. We will keep critical functions going. We'll fund them in that budget. Now, the problem that we have in Sacramento is that normally on May 15th, about 10 days from now, we would be getting, and we will still be getting, what's known as the governor's May revise. That May revise happens because on April 15th, people start paying their taxes, and we have a good picture then of what our actual revenue is going to be instead of just projected revenue. Well, we're not getting that because the period for filing tax returns was moved forward 90 days and will now happen on July 15th. So we will not know until the beginning of August with any degree of certainty what our revenue will be, and frankly, just how bad our revenue picture is. So we will do some additional budgeting after that occurs, probably towards the end of August. Your second question is really tied to how do we bring back the economy, and specifically, how do we bring back our tourism economy that we rely so heavily on to help fund the very important programs that we have in our local communities. And I think first and foremost, you asked Council Member, how are we going to get people to come back? Well, people are going, first, I think the domestic tourism industry is going to probably return first and then international tourists. But in either case, those people who are thinking about visiting anywhere in the world are going to want to know that the place that they're traveling to is safe. And so we need to, and I think, frankly, we should put our heads together on a sub-regional basis. This is a problem that you share with Santa Monica and with Beverly Hills and with the city of Los Angeles, because this is a main driver of all of our economies. And we have a lot of brain power and a lot of smart people who've been involved in these issues for a long time, in the industries for a long time. And so I think we need to put our heads together and start to think about how do we restore confidence in our tourism industry, and then implement those measures as rapidly as is safely possible. I don't want you to think that I ever forget about the city of West Hollywood. So I just want to show you what's on my wall here.
Nice.
Always in my mind.
John, do you have questions, please?
Thank you, Assemblyman, for spending some time with us tonight. I want to raise 2 points, rent and LGBT issues, for just a second. On the issue of rents, Governor Newsom, I feel, has been doing a great job over the past 2 months. But it's time for the legislature to step up. You're a co-equal branch of government, and I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad you're all going back to work, because we need to have a lot of smart brains thinking this through. You talked about the V economy, a very steep decline and then a very steep incline. And that, I think, is going to be highly dependent upon consumer confidence and people having some confidence that they're going to be safe before they start spending money, including that domestic tourism that you just mentioned. The biggest fear that I think I hear around the city of West Hollywood, given that 78% of our residents are renters, is that they're now falling further and further behind in rent. And when the emergencies are over or declared over, whether that be the end of June or the end of July, suddenly they're going to be required to start paying their rent, plus make arrangements for any deferred payments in the past. And that thought is so overwhelming. It's forcing people to save and hoard money rather than spend money. And in order for us to get out of this dilemma, we got to start spending money. To that degree, people have asked us whether we can just cancel rents. I told them we can't. It would be unconstitutional for us to do that. I don't know if California legislature can do anything to cancel rents or suspend rents without being in the same legal dilemma we find ourselves in, maybe only the Congress. But what tools or mechanisms, if any, do you have in Sacramento regarding suspending Costa-Hawkins, or looking at, asking the big banks to, again, give a suspension period for property owners and mortgage payments in order to give people who are the most vulnerable, falling through the safety net, renters who don't have more than $500 in the bank at any one time, the ability to feel they're going to be safe and secure? That's my first question.
Well, ask me an easy question,
sure.
Council Member. Thank you. This obviously is a critical question, because if we're not able to keep people housed, then we're going to increase the number of homeless on the street, and we'll have a cascading set of problems. I think you're right. I think the cancellation of rent is very difficult to achieve. And I think it frankly leads to another problem, because if there's no rent being paid, then in many cases, our smaller landlords they're going to fall into bankruptcy and go out of business. And who's going to buy their properties out of bankruptcy? Corporate landlords. And I don't frankly think, at least in my opinion, that that's a direction that we want to go either. So it would be helpful if we could find a resource to provide rental assistance to people. There's no question here that there is going to be a burden because there are so many people who are unemployed with no hope of restoring their income, at least in the near term. And so finding a place where we could provide rental assistance would be helpful. And, my mind is always open, as you know, from my history of legislating on these issues, on finding ways to assist tenants so that they don't lose their housing. We have gone from one form of a housing crisis to one that is still a crisis, but it's a much different crisis than it was only a couple of months ago. It's more severe, it's more widespread. It is a crisis that affects both, frankly, landlords and tenants who, as a result of tenants who are, in the case of landlords, where there are tenants who simply have the inability to pay rent right now, may not be able to pay their own bills, their own mortgages. And of course, it is a crisis for those people who can't pay rent and who are in fear of the next place being the street. I do want to, you asked about homelessness. Well, you didn't get there yet, did you? Do you want me to just roll into homelessness?
Yeah, Councilmember Heilman asked about it earlier, so yeah.
Project Roomkey that the county has been operating has provided I think the number is 1,700 hotel rooms right now. I don't think the program is performing as broadly as we'd like to see it perform, and as well as we'd like to see it perform. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to find ways to make hotel rooms available to more hotel rooms available to and make sure that people who are currently on the street feel safe in those rooms. I think we're experiencing homelessness in a way we never anticipated we would experience. That we always thought that if there was a room available, that, well, of course, homeless people would just be willing to take those rooms and come off the street. And it's not that simple. I mean, that's the fact of the matter is, so we've got a lot of work to do here, and frankly, very little time to do it in.
One more issue, and then I'm done, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I just want to bring up something for the LGBT community.
Yes, you did mention that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that LGBT people are proportionally impacted like all members of the general community, except the T, except our transgender community. I think our transgendered community is extremely vulnerable at this period of time. Many of them are undocumented, and because they are undocumented, they're not able to equally access state and federal benefits, and they're falling through the safety net. Many of them are sex workers or in the sex industry, and being as such, because they're engaged in activity that's considered illegal in the state of California, they're also finding themselves slipping through the safety net. I know that Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco is looking at this issue of trying to increase the safety net for the sex workers, especially transgender sex workers around the state. I know you don't shy away from issues like this that are hard, and I hope you take a look at that legislation, because it's a great deal of our people who are on the margins are within our transgender community. And then the final point I want to make is about 31 years ago, when AIDS first hit the gay community, Anthony Fauci, who I respect and admire, came up with AZT as the drug of treatment, ended up harming a lot of our people, actually killing a lot of our gay men. And what we ended up doing was creating our own drug approval process in California. Then Attorney General John Vandekamp sponsored legislation for an orphan drug bill that gave California the ability to create a mini FDA for the development of our own drugs and our own testing, because Washington, D.C. was asleep at the wheel with Ronald Reagan. Currently under Trump, it's just gross negligence, if not outright criminal, what's happening. And I think California can actually step forward and enter the arenas of not only testing, but also drug creation. And if we look at what John Vandekamp did 32 years ago, that orphan drug bill, we may be able to cut and paste a lot of what we did in the AIDS epidemic to really put our tech and pharmaceutical industry here in California to work and not have to wait for the FDA or the CDC. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments and the questions that are within. The trans community remains one of the most marginalized communities, and I agree with you. We need to find ways of reaching out and looking out for folks that are in our community. So I'll definitely have a look at Senator Wiener's bills. You're right. I haven't shied away from these issues in the past, and I won't now. With respect to the development of drugs, I think you probably know that there are many drugs, some vaccines, some treatment drugs like Rezidivir. I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Remdesivir. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, I was close. Some of them are moving forward more quickly than others. Could it happen more quickly? I certainly hope so. I was impressed with an article that I read about Michael Milken just a couple of days ago. He is actually putting a lot of effort into the development of vaccines and other medications since this crisis began. And one of his ideas is that instead of looking at the drug approval process as a sequential affair where you develop the drug, then you have phase 1 testing, then you have phase 2 testing, and then you start to manufacture if it proves successful after the other steps, then it shouldn't be looked at in that way. It should be looked at more as a horse race where everything happens at the same time. That requires a significant investment. There's also much more significant risk. But in an economy where we're losing $2 trillion a month as this crisis moves forward, it's worth taking that risk and investing in, for example, at the time you're doing the phase 1 trial, you're also starting to produce the vaccine in large quantities. You'll have several failures, but if we have that one success, it'll be worthwhile, and we will get to the success sooner than the minimum 18 months for development of a vaccine. That is the minimum period of time, and that's why you're hearing that a vaccine won't be available until at least the end of the year. So I think if we start to think creatively about some of these things, we might be able to make even more progress than is promised. Now, on the subject of testing, the governor has a task force on testing. It had been a goal to have a minimum of 25,000 tests per day available in California as of the beginning of this month. That goal has been met and exceeded. We're at roughly 30,000 per day right now. That's the good news. The bad news is to have a robust testing a system in place in California, we need to be at about 80,000. That is the goal for this summer, but it's going to be tough to achieve it. But it's good news that we've been able to meet our benchmarks up until now.
John Heilman, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I just want to reiterate what the mayor said earlier about how responsive your staff has been. I've had two constituents with state issues, one a licensing issue and one an employment issue, and your staff were all over it and very responsive. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I know Josh Kerpies is listening in on the meeting, and I sense that he's blushing right now.
Good.
But it's good for him to hear this, and I know that he will express your kind words to, and if he doesn't, I will, to the rest of our staff. We have a daily meeting with both my Sacramento and my local staff, and we stay on top of issues by having that daily meeting. It's been very productive for us.
So the other thing I wanted to add is I know we're all dealing with the immediacy of the crisis and all of the problems that's been created, but I hope we're also looking at the opportunities and sort of the positives that might come out of this. And one is certainly environmental, the reduction in transportation. And there's an item on our agenda tonight about how do we encourage more telecommuting and make sure that the reduction in traffic continues with us in some way as we reopen. And just one example of something that the state can do, as you know, there are lots of regional meetings of local elected officials. Sometimes those meetings—
I've been to a few.
Yeah, they're a half hour long, and you have 85 elected officials driving from all over LA County to get to one location. Those should be in the future after this crisis is over. I hope that they can continue to be through Zoom and other platforms. And then the other sort of related topic is that I think what this has done is it has really exposed the weaknesses in our healthcare system and in our safety net. And I think a lot of people now understand that we're all affected if we don't have healthcare for everyone. There are plenty of people who weren't getting testing because they didn't have access to a doctor who would order the test, or they didn't have the funds to pay for testing. So we need to make sure that we use this as an opportunity to build a safety net and a healthcare system that actually works in the future if we were to have another pandemic like this. Certainly the problems with the employment insurance and unemployment is one issue, but food security, that's something that we have been pressing on in the city of West Hollywood for a long time, but this really has expanded the number of people, and we now have a group of people who really understand the importance of these issues. So I hope the legislature will think about that and capitalize on it in the upcoming year. Thank you again for all of your work.
You're welcome. I certainly agree with you regarding healthcare, and we're seeing both the miracle of great healthcare and what it can do, and also the dark side, where we had a system that was able to gear up very, very quickly, but our lack of preparation on a state-wide level is something that we need to correct in the future. It's really outrageous when you think about it, that our stockpiles of personal protective equipment and other necessary equipment like ventilators had been depleted. And this, of course, has been replicated all across the country, and was most significant at the federal level. But it's something that we need to address and do better in the future. also, since this is a significant issue for me, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that this crisis is laying bare the lack of prevention that we have in our healthcare system, and the truly destructive role that obesity and that the epidemic of obesity and diabetes, heart disease, the terrible things that flow from diabetes are playing out in real time as we see much more significant death rates and much more healthcare dollars having to be spent addressing folks who have comorbidities that were entirely preventable. We have to get our act together and start living healthier lives, and that will allow us to withstand future pandemics, which today we can say with much more certainty than we could even a few short weeks ago, we need to be prepared for.
Thank you very much. That was kind of an extraordinary sort of effort on your part, and we certainly appreciate you bringing all that information and answering all of our questions. And I think all of us would be happy for this to continue for another hour, but we do have the city's business to engage in as well. So
well, I'm disappointed you're going to kick me out now.
Well, I kind of am giving you the 2-minute warning. I don't know if you have any final comments, but I just want to say that I'm so pleased that you're representing us in the Assembly, and I feel confident that at least our city and probably our colleague cities on the West Side will have fair and terrific representation as you move forward. There's a lot of issues to address, and you seem to have prioritized them quite well from this council member's point of view.
Thank you. Well, we've got a lot of work to do, and you know, it's a canard that's been around for a long time, and it gets abused a lot. But we are all in this together. Unlike anything we've ever seen before, more than anything we've ever seen before. This is something that we share, and we need. Now I know you really want me off.
No, I think
it was just when I was going to get to the part where I need to exhort you all to fill out your census forms. Too many people from West Hollywood have not done it yet. So consider yourselves chastised and get out and fill out the census form. That's how you're going to get funding for your city in the future. So everybody's got to participate in the census.
Thank you.
I know the city manager is nodding his head. You know, Paul knows how we allocate money in this world, and it's based on census numbers. It's based on your population. So in many cases, so let's make sure we all get out there and fill out the census form.
Thank you very much. Very, very much. Richard Bloom, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care, everyone. Be well.
All right, now we are going to move on to public comment. The city thanks you for participating in our meetings. Each person will get 2 minutes to talk about anything on our consent calendar or anything not on our calendar. Yvonne, how many people do you think we have who wish to speak a public comment?
We have about 8 people that want to speak under general public comment.
All right, so we'll hear from them and a couple more, but I think we do want to move on to the city's business after 20 minutes. So I'll let you take it away unless one of my colleagues has something to join before we allow that to happen. All right, Yvonne, please start the public comment period.
Okay, first speakers, please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
Is that me? Hello, council members. Ann Goldman here. Mayor D'Amico, it's good to see you've recovered well from the coronavirus, and my deepest condolences on the loss of your beloved mother. Many tragedies, and in the midst of this global pandemic, many of our residents are forced to shelter in place near people who saturate their apartments with secondhand smoke, from which there is no escape. Many of them, like me, have no place else to go. Council, please take emergency action with 2 weapons we need to use now. Both weapons will truly help protect the most vulnerable among us in battling this disease. First, reclassify secondhand smoke as a nuisance, so code compliance officers will be obligated to respond to complaints. It will enable them to issue warnings and fines to people who pollute their neighbor's air. As of this moment, secondhand smoke is not a nuisance violation in West Hollywood. Amazing in light of the science from the last century. The lethal toxins in secondhand smoke make everyone more vulnerable to COVID-19, but it is much more lethal to those of us with compromised immune systems, heart, asthma, lung disease, and diabetes. Second, please agendize and vote at your next council meeting, May 18th, to make multi-unit housing smoke-free. There is a disconnect between those of you who make our laws and their lack of enforcement and implementation on the ground. We have no protection from this simple violation. It's time to create laws that can be enforced. If we are truly a progressive 21st century city, you will find a way to do it now. We have 2 weeks to discuss the details. Our lives depend on it. Thank you. And if we have another 2 seconds, I just want to say that if we're going to ally with our West Side sister cities, Beverly Hills did it in less than 2 years, total implementation. And Culver City and Santa Monica all have non-smoking laws. Time for us to come into the 21st century. Please move quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Rob Bergstein. Rob, state your name, city of residence for the public, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Rob Bergstein, resident of West Hollywood. First, I'm holding all of you, Council, City Manager, and City staff, close to my heart in my thoughts and prayers as you are working to take care of West Hollywood residents, businesses, and visitors during the pandemic. I'm so grateful to all of you. At the last council meeting, you postponed to a date uncertain the staff report for a proposed smoke-free housing ordinance. While I fully understand that you are working in a crisis environment that changes from day to day or even hour to hour, it is my hope that you will agendize a full discussion on a smoke-free housing ordinance as soon as you're able to. The shelter-in-place order remains in effect, and I believe it will return this fall if and when there is a surge in new COVID cases. Every day that West Hollywood does not have an enforceable smoke-free housing ordinance is another day that our non-smoking residents' health being placed at risk in their own homes. Every day that West Hollywood does not have an enforceable smoke-free housing ordinance is another day that our most vulnerable residents, the elderly, those with immune system dysfunction, our children, and even our pets are being placed at risk in their own homes. Research clearly shows that those with pulmonary issues, which can and are caused by exposure to secondhand smoke, become much more sick with COVID with a lower survival rate. For the health and well-being of all of our residents, I would urge you to re-agendize the smoke-free housing ordinance as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rob. Yvonne, before you call the next speaker, and I don't believe Ms. Goldman or Mr. Bergstein exceeded this, but am I keeping the 2-minute clock or are you?
I'm keeping the 2-minute clock.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure I was doing all of my work here.
Okay, and next we have Seppi Shine. Seppi, state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, Seppi Shine, West Hollywood residents. Good evening, council members. Mayor D'Amico, I'm truly sorry for the loss of your mom. Ashley and I send our deepest condolences. I want to bring up workers' rights. Last week, LA City Council passed a workers' recall right ordinance, and it was the right thing. They did the right thing to protect the thousands of workers, specifically too in the hospitality industry, that have lost their jobs, to have the right to go back to where they worked after this is all over and when hotels open back up. I urge the City Council to agendize this for the next City Council meeting and pass a similar ordinance that LA City has now done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We now have our next speaker. Please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes.
Seems like we're
Hello?
not connected.
Sir? Okay, we're going to move on to another speaker. I think this is John Erickson. Can you state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak. John?
Hi.
John, you can begin now.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Mayor D'Amico and honorable city council members. John Erickson, City of West Hollywood. I just want to start by also sending off my condolences. And on behalf of the Stonewall Democratic Club, Mayor D'Amico, we adjourned our last meeting last week in memory of your mother. And I'm sending a special message from our entire executive board to you and your family. Additionally, I wanted to thank the council for several of the proactive items on the consent calendar tonight, specifically items 2I, 2L, 2M, 2N, and 5A, which you put on your agenda for consent. As a former city staffer in the events division specifically, the impact on our events process, as well as those that were in the pipeline as being produced or co-produced by the city, have taken an enormous toll on local nonprofits, as well as other organizations that would have produced a lot of events that we all look forward to as part of our One City, One Pride Festival or other Women's March, Women's History Month events. And so as we continue to look at proactive responses to this, I hope that we can come together with local community groups and nonprofits to find a way to put back this programming together and bring it back to the community, because I think we are going to be needing to come together in community now more than ever after being safer in our homes for several months. Additionally, I want to thank the ways the council is looking into further incentivizing visitors who will travel to West Hollywood in the future, to create this campaign with the Chamber of Commerce and Visit West Hollywood to really promote and help our frontline heroes to enjoy the city's hospitality industry. We're going to need to do all that we can to encourage visitors back into our city. And I hope that this consists of a broad coalition of people in the industry so we can bring back our major stakeholders here to WeHo. And then finally, 5A, which you added to your consent calendar, the agreement with ChargePoint. I just wanted to add that while WeHo is a longtime advocate for non-fossil fuel vehicle alternatives, I do believe that we can expand our charging options for our residents to make them more available across the city. While all these new locations are a start, we should look at how we can further incentivize landlords throughout the city to update their buildings and optimize how we can empower residents who may want to purchase electric vehicles to be able to charge at home versus at the curb. And while this is a longer term issue that we need to address, and working with our partners at SoCal Edison to make sure our electric grid can handle both more charging stations, and with our homeowners and landlords to update their buildings so we can be additionally ready for Charger All. This is a very important reminder that communities of color are dying at higher rates of COVID-19, in part due to poor air quality, and cleaning our air is a moral imperative for us all to improve the lives of people, not only in our own communities, but also across Southern California. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Next, we have Larry. Please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, everybody. Larry Block, West Hollywood. Condolences to you, Mayor D'Amico. Love you, brother. Tonight, I would like to discuss the reopening of our city and helping our local businesses float and grow during this hard time. Our local economy not only depends on tourists, but depends on you, our residents, to engage and support your local restaurant or coffee shop or nail salon and more. Most can see quiet streets and the abundance of available parking. It makes one wonder, where are all the cars, or where did all the residents go? Everybody knows that your favorite local business needs customers to survive. And I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for the webinars promoting ideas that can help many of us survive in the age of COVID, but also thrive into the future with new approaches to help our small businesses compete. While the budget trims events and programming, there are some things we can do to help our local economy. If we are going to build our community, invite new businesses to open, and take down those for lease signs up and down the streets, then we need to drive traffic locally. Our residents, who are the property owners and pay property taxes in the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per year, our renters are also feeling a pinch. But if we can ask our residents to think locally, eat locally, shop locally, and play locally by offering free parking to residents who support local businesses. Let's revive an idea I presented a few years back for an all-city parking pass. Your resident parking sticker would allow you to park for free in any of our city garages and eat and shop and play WeHo without an extra cost. We can promote our local small businesses, and we can promote our community village with one simple idea: the all-city parking pass for West Hollywood residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Block.
Now we have Mehdi and Josh. Can you please state your full name, and you have 2 minutes to speak. Mehdi or Josh? Mayor, there's a bit of a delay, so I'm giving people an extra couple of seconds to log on.
Really?
Mehdi or
Hello?
Josh, hi, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Josh White, and I'm a resident in the city of West Hollywood. First, I would like to just say thanks. Oh, I am unmuted. Oh. Hi.
We can hear you, Mr. White.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Hi, my name is Josh White. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for listening out to me, and my condolences as well goes out to the mayor. I'm here to talk about how dog grooming is considered essential and the ways that it's not considered essential in some businesses. It's only essential basically in pet stores, vets, feed stores, things like that, but only grooming salons, we cannot have grooming. We do the main essential job, but we can't be open. We help with the health and wellness of the community's pets to assure they are healthy and clean. We have very to no little clients contact. We take precautions that are very essential. We wear masks. We do curbside pickup. We're 6 feet apart. We do cash payments over the phone. I can tell grooming salons are seen the same as human hair salons, and it's not. We're here to help with the cleanliness of their dogs, especially in this time of the pandemic. I've seen a lot of dogs coming in recently in very bad conditions. People are having a very hard time bringing their dogs to any salon, and especially when you have clients that you have for 10 years with a lot of dogs with health risks that are just used to coming to your salon. So I just hope that you guys will realize that grooming is essential, no matter if it's in a pet store or anything, especially if it's all grooming. We're just here to basically help the community with their dogs, and we hope that you guys see us as essential.
Thank you, Mr. White. We will ask the city manager at the end of this during council member comments, so keep listening and we'll get an update.
Okay, thank you guys.
Next, we have Esther Schiller. Esther, please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
Esther Schiller. I live in Thousand Oaks. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm director of the nonprofit organization Smoke-Free Air for Everyone. There is new information about the coronavirus, which has to do with tobacco smoke and marijuana smoke, and even the aerosol produced by vaping. This information is for people who smoke or used to smoke. It's also for people who live in multi-unit housing and who are breathing a neighbor's smoke. Because this new information is so important, we're urging you to bring back to the council's agenda the proposed ordinance which would regulate smoking in multi-unit housing. According to researchers at the Nicotine and Cannabis Policy Center of the University of California at Merced, people who smoke or vape or who are former smokers are more likely to contract the coronavirus, and they are far more likely to die. This virus attacks the respiratory system, and for people who smoke, that part of the body has been severely damaged and is more vulnerable. In addition, health risks can also be made worse for the people who are being exposed to secondhand smoke and secondhand vaping. Their lungs have also been damaged. In addition, it's likely that with sheltering in place, the amount of smoke exposure has increased. This information needs the widest circulation and also changes in behavior. It's about saving lives, and bringing the proposed housing ordinance back to your agenda would provide that opportunity. Thank you.
We have our next speaker. Please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
I wanted to speak on item 5B. Do I go now or wait until later?
You can wait until that item comes forward.
Okay.
So I will put you back on hold. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 more speakers. Our next speaker, please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak. Hello, are you there? You have 2 minutes to speak under public comment.
Hi, I was going to speak on item 4B.
Okay, I will put you back on hold, and when that item comes up, I will bring you back.
Thank
you.
Hello, are you?
And this is our final speaker under public comment. Please state your name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak. Hello, caller. Please state your
Okay,
name,
yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is William Sigmuller. I'm the co-director of Sex Workers Outreach Project. I'm also an HIV, a resident of West Hollywood, and I'm an HIV research professional as well. I just wanted to share a resource that we have for anyone involved in, for anyone that's involved in the sex industry. We have some really great emergency relief funds that are available at swaplerf.com. We've already successfully raised $20,000 and distributed it to over 1,000 applicants for emergency cash aid. So I encourage everybody that is hearing this to check that out if it's relevant to you. Also, I'd like to support item 2P, the panel on what we can learn from the HIV epidemic. What's really exciting about it is how it's interdisciplinary, having health justice lawyers, epidemiologists, public health workers, and community embedded, really legends in the fight against HIV. They've really inspired me in my work, and we have so much to learn from really these oracles in our own community to address this current crisis in these crazy times. Also, my condolences to you, Mr. D'Amico, and thank you all for your leadership during these extraordinary times.
Thank you, Mr. Sigmund.
Mayor, that was our final speaker.
Okay, shall we have council member comments? I'm supposed to do this alphabetically. I think, John Duran, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for arranging having our assemblyman come and speak to us. It's really great. I look forward to the next guest on our bi-monthly show, maybe Senator Ben Allen, I don't know, whoever you've got lined up, or Lindsay as the incoming mayor, whoever you get lined up. I look forward to interacting with them. I just wanted to comment. We heard a couple of members of the public talk about the reopening of West Hollywood. And I just want to, and I'm sure our city manager will talk about this in his remarks, we're waiting for the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health to give us the green light. They're the ones that regulate licenses, food and beverage licenses. They're the ones that regulate bars and restaurants and nightclubs, but they are also using their police power, are regulating any assemblies of persons of 10 or more, which is impacting everything from the dog groomer to 12-step meetings to gatherings of the public for art or performances. Until they give us the green light, we are all waiting here anxiously. Having said that, that doesn't mean we can't start preparing for the eventual day. It will come when the governor and the county ease the restrictions on our community so that we can begin the slow and steady process of reopening our economy while simultaneously protecting people from new contagion and new infection. And it's going to require us to have those dual goals in mind at the same time. Coronavirus is not going to go away over the summer. It's going to be with us through the summer and the fall. And we are going to have to learn how to keep spinning two plates on cue sticks at the same time, one public health and one reviving our economy. To that end, I just wanted to alert the community that I know city staff and the city manager have been meeting weekly with the business community, with the chamber, with other leaders. We are starting to engage now with the West Hollywood Alcohol and Drug Recovery Center about the future operations of both the Recovery Center and the Log Cabin. Those are places, obviously, where there's no food or beverage served other than large groups of people assemble, and we have to make sure that when we get people back into the recovery meetings that they do so in a way that is safe for everybody who's participating. I think Paul mentioned our city manager way back when we were first debating all this in the early part of March, that shutting down the city is a lot easier than getting it revived and back on its feet. And so I'm hoping that as we deal with all of these issues in the upcoming months, throughout the rest of this year and possibly 2021 as well, that people will be patient with one another, patient with our city staff. We're all doing, I think, the best we can. This sort of event happens once every 100 years. The last time it happened was in 1918. Now it's back in 2020. And we are the fortunate generations of people that are going to have to navigate through a worldwide pandemic. I just want to say that I'm very confident in my colleagues and I having the ability to do that. We all have very different points of view, but I think we all ultimately share the same goal of getting West Hollywood back up on its feet, dusting ourselves off, and accepting what the new normal, whatever the new normal is going to look like, and moving forward as one community. One final thing. Yes, there's a lot of really smart people involved in city government, but there's a lot of really smart people out there in the community as well. There are lots of ideas, and we appreciate the emails and the calls and the Facebook messages that you're sending to each of us. Keep them coming. We'll do what we can. We really look forward to the day when we have a bustling Santa Monica Boulevard again, and a bustling Sunset Strip again, and a bustling Melrose again. Even if we're all masked up and 6 feet apart, we're still going to bustle. So thank you for all that, and I look forward to the rest of our meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, John Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had three things that I wanted to raise. The first one was the item on ChargePoint. Before all of this occurred, we had an agenda item directing staff to work with apartment buildings and with condo buildings to see if we could help those buildings install. What we're doing out in public spaces and installing electric car chargers is great, but I think most people want the convenience of having it at home where they park their car at night. So I would encourage staff to sort of take this as an opportunity to reach out to apartment owners and condo associations to offer our assistance in helping them install these kind of electric vehicle chargers. Secondly, we tabled the item on the park closure to speed up the construction project. But I would suggest in the interim, before this is brought back to us, that our city staff reach out to the organizations that typically use our facilities. The benefit of being able to move forward with construction is that we can get it done faster, but it does change what our promise was when the project started, which was that our existing facilities would remain open throughout the construction. So I think we need to circle back with those groups. And then finally, there were a couple of speakers on the smoke-free item. I support bringing that back to the council. It is an issue in our community, and I think it has become more pronounced as people are all forced to shelter at home. The impact of secondhand smoke is a problem. It's not only cigarette, but marijuana smoke, and it is an issue that I think we need to address and deal with in one way or another. So I support moving that forward.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Heilman. Councilmember Meister.
Yeah, thank you so much. First, my condolences as well, Mayor, for your loss. First, I want to encourage people to keep staying at home. The curve is flattening, but there are still new cases and deaths, and so it's more important than ever that we stay home. The faster we will be able to come back if we follow the CDC and the public health, LA County Public Health. So thank you to those people who have been doing that, and please keep doing it. Also, just want to reiterate about supporting our local restaurants, and they're out there with takeout. And so if you're hungry, call a West Hollywood business. I want to thank my colleagues for supporting 2J, the expansion of online events programming. I think it's really important to keep our community engaged. And I want to thank Councilmember Duran for co-sponsoring. I also want to support my colleagues for supporting 2K, which is encouraging telecommuting in West Hollywood. And as we've discussed tonight, we're looking at a new world post-COVID-19. And I think that if there was any silver lining, it was that we see that we could make a difference in the environment by staying home and working at home when we can. I also want to just ask the city manager if he could talk in his comments about the survey that is happening. I've gotten some questions from the public about the survey, so if we can please get an update on that, and also if communications can put out anything on social media about the survey, I think that would be helpful. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Horvath. Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor-to-be Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to, of course, add and echo condolences to you, to your entire family. I know how dedicated you've been to caring for your mom and being supportive of your family members. And I know that she's missed, but not gone from your life and your heart. And so we send our love to you and your family. I represented the city at all of the things you asked me to represent the city at: Clean Power Alliance, Sanitation District, Women in Municipal Government with National League of Cities, California Contract Cities Association. And I know that Paul has taken a leadership role also with the city managers meeting with contract cities. Thank you, Paul, for doing that. I want to thank our city staff for their extraordinary effort in making Denim Day one for the memory books. And thank you all for participating in that important day to remind us that sexual assault happens in our community, that ludicrous stories are made up about why it happens, but that we all have work to do to make sure that it doesn't happen anymore. I know that we have many items on our consent agenda. I want to thank our staff for working on mortgage and rent relief. I know that that's a conversation that's happening on a variety of levels and ways in the community. It's a concern at the top of mind, as Councilmember Duran highlighted in discussion with Assemblymember Bloom. And so I'm glad to see that that is added to our list of legislative advocacy priorities. I want to thank Visit West Hollywood and West Hollywood Chamber for joining us in this effort to provide opportunities for frontline workers to be welcomed to the city of West Hollywood, to be taken care of and find a place of rest and relaxation after this is over, or while it's happening and you're taking a break to take care of yourself. We want West Hollywood to be your home too. And thank you for all the work that you're doing on the front lines. And thank you for to our business community for finding ways to honor the work that these people are doing day in and day out right now. Councilmember Meister and I brought forward an item that was sort of made moot by LA County with regard to vote by mail ballots being automatically sent out to voters, but now you will automatically receive a vote by mail ballot according to LA County. Our staff will be working to make sure that actually does happen, and our communication staff will make sure that you are aware of that when the time is ready. But it's a very important change to make sure that people are able to exercise their right to vote in a safe way. So thank you to Councilmember Meister for teaming up with me on that, and glad to see that that's something that can happen, not just in West Hollywood, but throughout all of LA County. I know that at our last meeting, we granted the Cannabis Cafe the ability to be open during this time, but I think there were some unanticipated fees that almost might make moot their ability to reopen. And so I don't know if that's coming up in our later cannabis item, but I just wanted to raise that issue that maybe we could take a look at waiving those fees. Given the circumstances, and since it's going to be a temporary license anyway. On Wednesday, twice on Wednesday, thanks to the leadership of Lieutenant Mulder and our public safety staff, we will be honoring National Nurses Day, which will kick off National Nurses Week. And thank you to Councilmember Heilman for joining in with me on that. I know our city is proud to recognize the healthcare workers and nurses who are on the front lines, people who often go overlooked, people like respiratory therapists. We know that it's now more than ever, their work is in our line of sight, and we thank them for all that they're doing. You can watch this from home. There will be live coverage. I know that KTLA will be showing it live, so please watch from home. We don't ask that you come out and witness the motorcade and the lighting that will be happening of City Hall and the lanterns. There will be plenty of coverage for you to see online. There's a graphic that our communications team has created that you're also able to share to show your support. We still want you to practice safer at home, but we do want to recognize in a special way our nurses. Of course, when we recognize the nurses, there were a couple of phone calls about other things that are happening. Today is also Firefighters Day. Tomorrow is Teacher Appreciation Day, which kicks off Teacher Appreciation Week. Lots of days, and so I just want to make sure nobody is going unseen. We see your work, we appreciate your work, and we thank you for all that you're doing. I know the Rainbow was thanking firefighters this past week, providing them with free dinners, and so it's nice to see our business community supporting our frontline workers. And I think that wraps up my comments. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions for the city manager. I prepped him on many of these, so shouldn't be any big surprises, no big eyes and oh my God, what? So the first is there's been questions about how we can get the homeless some masks, and I know we have homeless service providers, and perhaps we just need a small contract amendment to give them some money to buy some masks. I know some of our local businesses are selling masks, and we all get 6 or 8 emails a day from somebody who's got masks for sale, but what we don't see them is on the homeless people. And I think if in fact our homeless service providers are meeting up with our homeless residents every day, 4 days a week, they can certainly pass out some masks. And I think that would do a couple of things. It would provide them with the kind of safety they need. It would also allow them to go into businesses if they wanted to buy some food or use the restroom, and it gives them an opportunity to do that. And even as I'm speaking, people are texting me offers to give masks. So send those texts to the city manager in an email, and I'm sure he will respond. Or you can send them to ccouncil@weho.org, and I will forward them. The second thing is, I do want to ask about pet grooming. I think that must be something we can work on. If you can do pet grooming, if you have a store that sells pet food, or you are a veterinarian, but you can't do it if that's your only business, we either need to allow pet groomers to sell dog food so that they can do pet grooming, or we just need to figure out a way to ask them to do that. And perhaps that's already happened with the governor's expansion of new opportunities starting on Friday. The third item is I'm really interested in when we can open up our public spaces to use. I know I asked our city manager if he could check in with our West Side city colleagues. Beverly Hills has its parks open and people are using them, or at least the one along Santa Monica Boulevard. They have it well signed and people are engaged in wearing masks. But I think we must have the ability to allow some people to use our parks. I think after 6 weeks now, people know how to engage in social distancing. They certainly won't object if we ask them to do that. And so I'd like to see us consider opening our parks, or at least put forward on our website when that will happen and under what circumstances, so that people can have some of their expectations understood. I, like Councilmember Heilman, would like to see the smoking in apartments come back. I had hoped to do that while sitting in this chair, but I'm happy to do that whenever it comes, and the sooner the better. I would agree it's now, I think, more important than ever that we address this in some way, one way or another, make a ruling. The fifth item I wanted to talk about was the 5 of us plus the city attorney plus the city manager seem to be making all the decisions for the past 6-8 weeks. And I think we need to start scheduling our commissions and board meetings. I would like to recommend that we schedule a Human Services Commission meeting and a Rent Stabilization Commission meeting in May, if we can pull that off. But like we did when I asked for the events calendar to come forward, it would be, I think, good to have a commission and board meetings calendar for the next quarter come forward, so that people beyond the 7 of us can get a chance to weigh in on these decisions we're making and provide us with additional opportunities to hear ideas and to talk about what our, with respect to our human services providers, they would have a chance to weigh in on how COVID is affecting their service provision and how they're doing it and what it means for service needs up and provision availability down, et cetera. I think that's something we would need to do sooner than later, especially around issues of food, and for our Rent Stabilization Commission around questions of paying rent and opportunities and how to deal with landlords to assist in any ways they can with tenants. So if it's all right with my colleagues, I'll ask the city manager to try and work on those in May and to bring back at the next responsible meeting. It may not be at the meeting in which Mayor Pro Tem Horvath becomes the mayor, but if not that one, then the next one, because I do want this government to, as we all do, be as open as possible, allowing as much input as possible. And if the excellence with which our city clerk's office is running this meeting is an indication, they've got it down. And certainly, I think this also begins to ask the question about, if we're running our city online and our events online, What is the strategy? How do we expand it? How do we make it something that's doable and not just in an ad hoc basis or a one-off basis, but really becomes what we do as a city? And finally, or penultimately, I promised Hernan I would talk about the census. Our assembly member did the heavy lifting there, but and now the email, there it is. As of today, our self-response rate in the city is 51.3%. Self-response rate in the county is 53.2%. In California, it's 57.8%. So we are a good 10 to 12% behind our state in responding, and we really need to do that. We need to pay attention to this moment and our census and do what we can. If anyone has any questions, they can give me or anyone at City Hall or any of our city council members a call or send an email, and we will connect you up with how to answer your census. And finally, on a lighter note, there is a Mother's Day drag explosion planned in honor of mothers all across West Hollywood and perhaps around the country. Some of our local promoters are putting together drag shows, and there's sort of 4 categories of drag show. The first is, you know, for yourself in the mirror, and you just record it and you put it online, or maybe it's for your friends online, and it's a little more elaborate. Maybe it doesn't just happen in the bathroom, but it happens in your living room and there's music, or maybe it's for your neighbors and you walk down the sidewalk alone and you do a little drag show for your neighbors, or maybe it's out in the world at some important location to you. But again, we need to practice social distancing, and we're trying to use a hashtag from WeHo with Love. So if you have a little bit of drag in you, I know my dear mother loved a good drag show, so I'll be participating maybe, and certainly others around the city and perhaps around the country. So from WeHo with Love, a Mother's Day drag explosion is on the way. And with that, I turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, mayors, members of the city council. I have notes, so I'm going to try to answer all the questions you asked. And if I missed anything at the end, please remind me. Not going by any importance, because all the issues we discussed tonight are equally important. The smoking ordinance, the last time it was on the agenda, it was tabled, and we were going to table it till the fall. If the council wants that back sooner, we can bring it back sooner. It seems as though hearing from a couple of you that it might be prudent to bring it back sometime in June or July. So we will look to do that. Masks for the homeless community, talking with social services staff, we can work to augment our contracts with our service providers to have them purchase and distribute masks. Like many of the other challenges with the homeless population, we won't be able to make them wear them, but at least we can have them and provide them routinely during the course of the week. Public spaces, opening our parks. I do a weekly call with the West Side cities. The Beverly Hills city manager couldn't attend the call today, but we'll continue to look at parks. But as a reminder, the reason we did close the parks is because people were not social distancing. We were putting up signs, we were having security ask them not to create crowds. They ignored us, so the only option we had was to close the parks. But maybe there's a new willingness for people to be more cooperative, and we'll work. I'll work both with our park staff and also with the Department of Public Health to see if the standards have changed in that regard. We have a list, and it was emailed to me, but I have another email that I need to reference first. That lists a number of the commission meetings that are scheduled. So those are in the pipeline. They may not be happening in May because the noticing and the staff work isn't done yet, but there's a number of those that are being scheduled. I know that we're looking at human services. I know that there's an item being prepared for the Rent Stabilization Commission, and we're going to be taking some information to the Transportation Commission regarding some of the quiet street proposals that we plan to roll out during the current crisis. The charging stations, long-range planning is working on communicating with residential buildings. So that's in the pipeline. I'll have an internal email sent to the council providing a little bit more detailed update on that particular issue. The survey that is taking place right now, the city continues to work with FM3. They perform strategic surveys for the city of West Hollywood. We're doing one now. The topic is primarily looking at the COVID-19 response from the city, working with the community to find out what information they want to receive and how they want to receive it. Also learning about issues where people are personally impacted, obviously losing their jobs, not being able to pay bills, not being able to go to work. So that's really the nature of that survey. We're also looking at, once again, ranking services by the city and also looking at potential augmenting revenues in the future. So that survey is happening now. It takes about 20 minutes long to do the survey. And as I think Councilmember Meister mentioned earlier, people are already receiving those calls. Item 2K is an item introduced by the mayor and Councilmember Lauren Meister about mobile remote working. One of the items that we've really been pushing on staff at City Hall is also challenging staff to be prepared for the next wave and kind of creating the office going from 2020 to 2030. It seems like we're doing that overnight. And looking at one is, how are we going to reopen City Hall? How are we going to maintain safe social distancing? One of the items Councilmember Meister and I were talking about, and I think I've had this conversation with a number of you as well, is that we're getting to an age, or we're getting to a stage now where unless you really want to come into City Hall, you should not have to come into City Hall to receive any service that we provide. We're even doing complex planning documents now online. So that is the future. We have the technological infrastructure to support that, and that's something that we want to promote and continue. One of the other directives on 2K was to expedite the economic development study that we had approved back in January 2020. It really makes sense to move forward with that. I think it needs to be, and I'll talk a little bit offline with the council members who initiated that item. I think at this point, a little bit more holistic and future thinking, because the economy is going to be constantly changing over the next couple of years. And I think this really gives us an opportunity not only to look at individual segments in our city, but also I think Assemblymember Bloom was totally correct when he articulated that there's a synergy with the West Side cities and that we should all be working in harmony to rebuild our new economic infrastructure and working together to bring guests and people back to our communities. I have a number of items that I need to report on. So before I report on my items, did I miss anything? All right, good. Okay, so on kind of a happy note, the planning and development services, they were winners of leadership and sustainability, and they received the award of excellence by the American Planning Association's Sustainable Communities Division. This recognizes the city's outstanding work over the last 2 decades in developing progressive environmental policymaking and program creation. So that's kudos to the staff for doing the work, but also kudos to the City Council for really pushing us in that direction. The City Manager's Department is continuing to do a number of webinars. We're doing these in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce and other agencies. Tomorrow, May 5th at 2 o'clock, we have a COVID-19 webinar series, which is combating loneliness, isolation, depression, and anxiety during the COVID-19 pandemic. Registration is available at weho.org. And these are great webinars we've been pushing out. We've been having good attendance. We are also editing those and putting them on cable TV so people can see them at a later time. So this is a resource to our community. Also for business development, we have temporary parking signs for curbside delivery and pickup. These are available for restaurants and businesses to receive temporary curbside pickup zone signs that they can put outside of their businesses. You can request that on the city's website, and we'll arrange to have those dropped off. And this, again, it encourages safe curbside deliveries for our local restaurants. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne, can we please have the fiscal impact on the consent calendar?
Yes, the fiscal impact for tonight with the addition of item 5A and the removal of items 2I and 2P is $9,378,376 in expenditures, $0 in potential revenue, and $0 in waived fees.
Move
Okay.
we approve.
It's been moved by Councilmember Heilman and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Horvath. Can we have a vote, please, on the consent calendar?
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much. We shall now move, scrolling down the agenda, to item 4A, which was put, yes, item 4A.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight for item 4A is an extension of the temporary moratorium on evictions during COVID-19 pandemic. And you will also have an opportunity during this item to comment and provide direction on any other COVID-19 response measures that you may want to discuss this evening. So as you'll remember,
Hello?
phone, please.
Yeah, I'm here for public comment for this item.
Could you mute your phone? We'll have public comment in just a moment.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Thank you. Okay. I know there's a little bit of a delay. So anyway, on March 16th and April 6th, the City Council adopted urgency ordinances which provided residential and commercial eviction protection for non-payment of rent related to the COVID-19 pandemic and related financial impacts. In addition to those local ordinances that we have adopted, the state has also addressed this issue on multiple fronts. The governor has issued two orders regarding eviction protection, one of which authorizes local governments to do what West Hollywood did and adopt these types of ordinances. And then the second order, which was adopted a little later in March, creates a statewide eviction protection program that is in place through May 31st. And it differs slightly from our program in that tenants have to provide notice to their landlord within 7 days after their rent is due, or under our ordinance, tenants have 30 days. And there's some other differences. So the governor has addressed this issue in two different ways. The California Judicial Council has also in the past month and a half dealt with this issue by issuing emergency rules added to the California Rules of Court. And Rule 1 is the important one we've been looking at, which essentially suspends unlawful detainer actions in the courts for the time being. So it, to provide a little bit more detail, it prevents unlawful detainer actions filed on or after April 6th to proceed. It will not allow entry of a default to any defendant who fails to appear in one of these actions, and it continues trial date out. The court's rules are in place for 90 days after the governor lifts the state of emergency. So tenants do have some statewide eviction protections as well. And then on April 14th, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors amended its county eviction moratorium to extend it to incorporated cities in the county that do not have local eviction moratoria in place. So there was a variety of rules in place. Our ordinance, to be consistent with the governor's first order on this matter, is set, the eviction protections end on May 31st. And I know that there has been some requests to extend it longer. We don't know exactly how long this state of state and local emergency are going to continue. And so we looked at this issue, and at the moment, the governor's order has not been extended. It may be throughout the month of May, but we don't know. And so we thought it was necessary to look at our ordinance and see what we could do to provide tenants and residential tenants and commercial tenants some certainty as to what rules are going to be in place in this very uncertain world, and also balance that with these constantly changing rules. So what we've come up with and what is proposed in your agenda tonight is an extension of our local moratorium ordinances so that our residential and commercial tenants can have certainty that these are the rules that are in place. We've put out webinars on what the rules are. We've sent out mailers on what the rules are. So our residential and commercial tenants can have certainty on what they are, continue it through the end of June. And we will come back before the end of June, likely the second meeting in June, and look at this issue again and look at our state of local emergency and see if it makes sense to extend it further and see what has been done at the state legislative and governor's office on these topics. So this is kind of a balance of all the interests here. And our recommendation is to extend our ordinances through the month of June, which leads me to one important change. In the ordinance, which is attached to your staff report, it only changes one section of the ordinance. And in section 2, it says the ordinance shall remain in effect until June 30th, 2020. And I've received some comments that changing the word until to the word through would be more clear to people. So in section 2, I recommend changing the word until June 30th to read through June 30th. And that is what's being proposed tonight for a legislative change. As I mentioned at the beginning, the agenda item was also crafted so that the city council could provide feedback and direction and input on any other city COVID-19 emergency measures that the city had been implementing. So with that, I'm available for questions.
John,
and
please.
that concludes my report.
Lauren, just to make sure I'm clear on what your plan is, the idea is that we would extend this through June 30th, and then you would give us the option, you would come back as we see more of the state legislation, et cetera, and then we could determine whether or not to extend it further depending on whether the emergency is lifted and what the conditions are then, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I think we had a public speaker, Mayor. I don't know
Yes,
if he's still there.
I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perhaps. Yvonne, if you want to start our public speaker
Yes, for this
effort.
item, we have about 3 people who wish to speak. So the first person is Seppi Shine. Seppi, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening again, City Council members. I am calling in to speak in support of extending the moratorium. While Councilmember Duran earlier in comments mentioned that people do feel that they might have a big burden of the ones that are choosing to utilize postponing payments. There are some at the beginning of this that may not have known about it, may not have utilized it, may not have immediately been laid off. At this point, there are, as Assemblymember Bloom pointed out, many people that still have not even gotten their unemployment, including 1099 workers that just last week just applied and are still waiting. Many residents are in dire need, and this would provide comfort and assurance to them. And there are also many that are also working, so they're not utilizing this. I like the pragmatic approach of this, and I'm in support of extending of the extension till June, and then coming back, having you all come back and look at this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shine.
And next we have Larry Block. Larry, you have 2 minutes to speak on item 4A.
Hi, Larry Block, West Hollywood. First, I want to say that although I am a homeowner, I am also a renter. Right up the street, as most of you know, is my shop Block Party, and that rent is among the highest in the city. So I really see things from both sides. Upon asking one employee, Steve, if they needed help with their rent, he replied, "I can pay the rent, but Tiffany can't." Tiffany is his boyfriend who works as a drag queen and was out of work. So Steve said he isn't going to pay the rent and will write the letter to the landlord. And it really made me think that no matter what happens, we live in a world where there are often bad actors who take advantage. The fact is, not everybody is out of work, and many can still afford to pay their rent. Many of our seniors on Social Security have the same income as before and the added benefit of government assistance. And most of my employees receiving unemployment, including my employee's partner, are also getting a $600 a week bonus and are making it more easy for them to stay at home than coming to work. They make more staying at home. So I really do not think a one-size-fits-all extend the moratorium is a fair or practical as a solution to the problem. A fairer proposal is that any extension require an additional verification on how COVID has affected the resident and includes a repayment plan. Because if we make it too easy for the bad actors at the expense of the honest landlords, we will hurt many who are really just small business owners of a single property. And also, it's real important to think about the result of deferring months of rent down the line. This can have a counterproductive effect of placing such a burden on the tenant's head that they opt to move. And then the landlord gets to put the space back on the market at market rate without even paying the tenant a relocation fee. So if you support renters, not like some of the other candidates who just want to suck it up to the renters, this is not a solution to the problem. Short term, you might help the tenant, but long term, that tenant is squeezed and that property owner may choose out of the rental business and nobody wins. So too much of a giveaway is a lose-lose for all. The only possible solution is more money towards rental assistance for those who qualify and a fairer process to verify this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Block.
Next, we have John Erickson. John, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hello, Mayor D'Amico and council members. I think one of the main things we need to remember here is that the city has always made sure to protect renters and always lead the way for not only the rest of the state, but also here locally, and being an example that the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles can always look to be on the right side of history. We have a lot of residents that are unsure about when their next paycheck's going to come in, if they've experienced medical debt, or if they've had to take on additional debts and other burdens that have made so paying the rent almost impossible for them. And they're really wondering how they're going to survive post this crisis, but right now they're also worrying how they may survive because of this crisis. This is the right item. I am in full support of it. I am in full support of making sure that this city continues to do what it does best, and that's protecting renters. And so please pass this item, continue to stand for the mission of this city, and make sure that we're standing behind and putting good governance practice first and foremost, and making sure that at the end of the day, we're here to serve the renters and the people of West Hollywood. And that I have to thank each and every one of you for putting this forward and extending this moratorium. Thank you.
Mayor, that was our last speaker for this item.
Thank you. Lauren Langer, I have a question about the last time, or perhaps it was the time before when we discussed these temporary moratoriums and evictions. There was some discussion about tenants who had someone staying with them, or tenants who wanted to invite someone to live with them in order to cut their rent by some portion. And is that still included in this? And is that still allowed? Can tenants modify their leases for the long term under this temporary moratorium?
Yes, it's still part of the ordinance. We're still operating under the safer at home orders, and people are required to stay home and in some cases might be finding alternate places to live in order to accomplish this in a safe manner. So yes, it is still part of the ordinance.
But if someone had an apartment and was aware that they didn't have a job. They're unlikely to, they worked in a movie theater. Those are not likely to open for months, many months after perhaps the rest of our economy opens. Can those people take on a roommate or two in their apartment and add their name to the lease and become long-term tenants under this?
Can they reach out to their landlord and
no? Can people? My concern. Let me frame it just in another way. And if someone wants to jump in and try to explain what I'm trying to explain, but if someone is supposed to pay $1,500 a month rent and is clear that they can't do it, didn't do it last month, won't do it this month, can't do it in June, but maybe can take on a roommate and can what was once a studio apartment but now has two people living in it, but they're not on the lease. Does this allow for that? Does this allow for our residents to make different housing choices for the long run? Because I think for many people, this is exactly the right thing. They'll get back on their feet. They'll pay their rent over the 12 months after we end these. But for many people, taking on that much debt could follow them for a decade through their 20s into their 30s. And perhaps they just want to make a different housing choice. And I just wonder if we're allowing for that as part of this moratorium.
No, I think what the ordinance is intended to do is prevent evictions for having unauthorized people in a unit. So it's for this period of time when people might need to find alternate housing arrangements in order to do this safely. I think that it's our goal. So that shouldn't be grounds for an eviction for the time being, but I don't think it's intended to provide long-term solutions beyond this period.
Is that something that this could provide? If we as a council had said we want to look at those kinds of solutions?
The problem with all of this is we're trying to balance so many interests, and you do have leases that are in place, and we want to be careful not to interfere with contracts that are existing. So we're trying to do this and justify each piece of it. And so for right now, we're focused on keeping people in their homes to prevent homelessness and prevent spread of the virus. And if that's an issue to look at later on, we can consider it. But I would be a little bit concerned about interfering to that degree in the contracts that are in place.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? John Duran.
Thank you. Mayor, before I make my comments, I want to respond in part to what you just raised. I think the answer is no. We cannot rewrite a contract between a landlord and a tenant. That would be a substantial interference with their contractual rights and impair their property rights. This is just a temporary relief that we're providing people to prevent eviction. But can we modify the terms of an agreement that requires a landlord's consent before another tenant is admitted as part of the leasehold? No, I don't think we can. I think that we can just provide this as part of our temporary moratorium, but to actually get in and rewrite the terms or attempt to rewrite the terms of a lease between a landlord and a tenant, I don't think we have the ability to do that. I mean, I welcome the city attorney comments on that or research it further, but I don't think we can modify or alter the terms of an agreement between a landlord or a tenant permanently, meaning that if somebody brought in a co-tenant because they were falling short, that once this epidemic is declared over and that person wants to stay on, I don't think we have the ability to allow that to happen unless Sacramento wants to give us the ability to do that. And I don't think they currently do. But I'll let Ms. Langer think about that. And let me just respond with what I wanted to talk about. I want to thank Ms. Langer and Mike Jenkins for providing this to us. But I have to say that I don't agree with the increments in time. I think that it's far too cautious. And considering that we have 78% of our residents who are tenants, I think we need to be a bit more forthright in providing adequate protection. The problem with incremental increases, while it's very conservative and very cautious, it means that every 30 days, we're going to be back having to review this issue yet once again. And every 30 days, a lot of our residents who are literally living hand to mouth at the moment are going to wonder, okay, am I protected for another 30 days? Am I going to have to worry about the rent starting on June 1st or July 1st or August 1st? It doesn't give us enough of a buffer in order to prevent massive and widespread evictions when the emergency is over. I want to propose 90 days, and I want to tell you my reasoning behind the 90 days. The courts have declared they're not going to accept any evictions until after September the 1st. The governor's order says that 90 days after the expiration of the governor's orders, the courts cannot accept unlawful detainers. They can, however, file a 3-day notice. So let's just use an example. If this ordinance was to expire come June the 30th, and on July the 1st, a tenant was not able to pay their rent in full, a landlord can serve a 3-day notice after the expiration in July, but is precluded from moving forward on that unlawful detainer until September the 1st. That doesn't mean that the landlord's rights have in any way been placed in abeyance. They can move forward with that eviction come September the 1st based upon the default from the first month of the expiration of the emergency ordinance. So in essence, all we end up doing is delaying evictions until after September the 1st. By asking for a 90-day period, rather than a 30-day period, it at least sets into stone that people have the buffer of the summer in order to figure out what they're going to do in terms of their ongoing housing issues. It's true that senior citizens have been largely unaffected by this because they are already getting their Social Security or their pension or other government assistance. And it's true that there are some people who are still working who have the ability to pay their rent. But we also know that within the city of West Hollywood, we have so many people in the service industry who work in restaurants, in bars, in retail shops, who are now not working and who run the risk of becoming evicted whenever this ordinance expires. I know that it's going to be a burden. When you think about the average rent for a studio in West Hollywood is $2,000, that if somebody ends up going into a non-payment for 3 months, that becomes a $6,000 burden. But when do you want them to be evicted then? Come June the 1st or September the 1st? Why not give them the luxury of having more time to figure out how they're going to pay off that $6,000 and the ongoing rent? I think by being cautious, we're not giving the sort of certainty that I think a lot of tenants who are in really dire straits at the moment, the ability to think about how they're going to move forward with life. We know this economy is not going to snap back to attention over the summer. It's going to be a very slow reopen. Restaurants halfway operating, bars maybe halfway operating. A lot of our businesses have said they're not going to go back to full employability until they get some assurance that consumers are going to start to spend money again. So it's not going to be just an automatic when we declare this is over, whether the president declares it, the governor declares it, or we declare it, the people are going to be able to start paying their rent once again. We need to give people that time that's needed in order to prepare for some really difficult times ahead. And rather than go incrementally every 30 days and have to extend this in June and then July and then August, let's coincide with the courts. The courts have said we're not going to accept any unlawful detainers until after September the 1st, given the governor's current order. Great. Let's align ourselves with that. Since they can't do evictions anyway till September the 1st, why not extend the moratorium for 90 days? I know that we would be going beyond what California is doing and beyond what the city of Los Angeles is doing, but we've done that historically forever. We are the tenant advocate city, one of them, along with Berkeley and Santa Monica, and we should be pushing the envelope here to give people that level of comfort that they need to know they're not going to end up homeless or having to live the only place they've called as home for decades. We need to give people some sense of comfort. I know that, at least on this council body, half of us are working and getting paychecks. The other half of us are not getting paychecks right now. And for those of us that are not getting paychecks right now, who do not have any income, who are living off savings, this looks like a very dire predicament for so many of us, that we're asking the council to provide that cushion that's needed in order to give us the time to figure out how to do this. Just going to June 30th is not sufficient. And you'll say, well, we'll extend it another 30 days. it's really hard to be thinking about the rest of one's livelihood or their housing in 30-day increments. That doesn't allow me to sleep well at night, nor do I think for those that are unemployed in the city to also sleep well at night. Let's do the right thing and give it a 90-day period along with the courts and their ability to accept an eviction. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I think if we're going alphabetically, we're at John Heilman, but I don't know if we all have something to say about this or want to move forward.
Yeah, I'll jump in and thank you. I think Councilmember Duran raises a very good point, but I think his comments already provide the answer. The state is already, the Judicial Council is already not allowing evictions to go forward until September. So regardless of what our ordinance says, no tenants in West Hollywood will be evicted. I think what Lauren was suggesting is that she wants to see what the state does so that when she comes back, we can align our ordinance with the state so that there is some consistent protection for tenants. And there's a clear message, not only by the state and the Judicial Council, but by the city, that everyone will be protected. I understand the insecurity that people have, but I think Lauren's approach is a prudent approach. We also don't want to put tenants in a position where they are so far behind with their rent that they will never be able to make it up. And I think the mayor raised that point earlier. So I think this approach of taking it slow, and then when we come back and look at this again in a month, we could, if we want to, extend this until September 30th, or even later if we think that's the prudent thing to do. But I think this, as a temporary measure, needs to move forward tonight. I don't think we can really rewrite the ordinance that Lauren has presented to us today. So I'm in support of moving forward with what was presented. And then when it comes back to us, I'm certainly open to extending it further.
Lauren or Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I understand Councilmember Duran's concerns. I think that there is that feeling of uncertainty, and if we're going month by month, I think that's a very difficult thing to put renters through, people through. So I mean, I am open to that, to extending it for 90 days, 60 days compromise, but we'll see what you all have to say.
Before you go, Lindsay, I have a question for the city manager. I know we're doing a survey. Are we asking in that survey if people have lost their work and are underemployed or unemployed?
I haven't seen the full details, but the summary does ask about their current economic status. So I'm sure that is part of the information we're going to be gaining from the survey.
Because I am aware that, you know, we have many people who are on fixed incomes, but they're also in affordable housing. We have many homeowners who are in theoretically a slightly different bracket since they own a home, and they would have a different set of problems anyway. Mm-hmm. So it would be interesting to know if that's 40% are not on fixed incomes and not homeowners, or is it a larger number? And how much of that 40% is at risk of losing their housing because of lack of work? So it might be too late to change the survey, but it would be interesting the next time we visit this question to have the answer to those questions available.
Yeah, totally agree.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. I, as a renter, I certainly understand if I'm not able to pay my rent, I'm not able to live in the city, and I lose a home that I've been in for a long period of time. So I understand the concerns that people are facing. I know that we want to do all that we can to provide people certainty and support in this time. And I know that we've provided funding to make sure that services are available, and people have been taking advantage of those resources that the city's provided to help keep people in housing. So I think not only by extending a moratorium, but in other ways, we as a city have made that commitment, both in terms of financial and in policy, to make sure that people are able to stay in their homes. If the ordinance is able to be extended, I'm certainly open to that. I don't know if June 30th is the end date, but looking at it from a slightly different perspective, if we believe this coronavirus pandemic will continue through the end of the year, are we then saying that the crisis and the time that people don't have to pay rent would extend that entire period? I'm not sure I'm prepared to do that. But I do think that I understand that people who are in this precarious situation want more certainty. I think that I'm hearing from every single member of the city council a commitment to making sure that renters are protected. But I also think what we're trying to do is an incremental approach to address the problem in front of us, and not get ahead of a problem or create a different one with the solution that we're creating. So if there's a majority will to move forward and with an extension, I'm fine with what's before us tonight. If there's a majority will to extend it more, I'm open to that, certainly. But I do think that I don't want to cause more problems than we're solving by extending the moratorium.
Before anyone makes a motion, City Attorney Langer, does this need to pass with a 4 to 5 vote?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
So, Mayor, I was going to suggest maybe we could do, Lauren, how difficult would it be to extend the date from June 30th to July 30th?
I think we can do that because this portion of the ordinance is very short. So with the change that I read earlier, changing until to through, we could just also change the date, read into the record July 30th.
Can we make it July 31st?
July 31st.
July 31st, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe we can do that and then bring it back. That will give you some more time and our housing staff some more time to think about the consequences of a longer extension. We'll have more understanding of what the state is doing. We'll also have opportunity for more input as well.
Okay.
So with that change, I'll move the urgency ordinance with the change of extending it through July 31st.
And I'll second that. Oh, John Duran, you want to second that?
No, I don't want to second. I have a question though about
Yes.
the motion. Is that for both residential and commercial?
Yes.
Yes, July 31st for both?
Yes.
All right, I just want to respond quickly to just a couple of things. I appreciate, first of all, thank you all for extending to July 31st. I think that's helpful. With the courts coming back into accepting unlawful detainers effective September the 1st, that doesn't mean though that somebody couldn't be in default in July or August. Now that we've extended till July 31st, if somebody's in default on August the 1st, you cannot unring the bell. When the courts open, if somebody has already not paid rent within the 3 days on a 3-day notice, they are already in default. So when the courts reopen September the 1st, we already have somebody in default on a 3-day notice in August, for example, which means you cannot fix that. They're already in default. They're heading for a straight eviction come September the 1st. So that is the only thing. I think we have to recognize that we're dealing with different deadlines here, and that landlord-tenant law is entitled to expedited processing. They have their own rules under the Code of Civil Procedure. And when you're in default on a 3-day notice, on that 3rd day, if you don't pay, you're in default whenever you get your eviction heard. So I just want us to be wary of the problem we're dealing with when we have a court system that allows unlawful detainers to go to the front of the line ahead of all other civil cases, and they're entitled to expedited review before all other cases. And these cases move very quickly in the Santa Monica court. And the commissioner who's there, she is not friendly to tenants. You all need to know that the judge, the judicial officer who hears our cases is not tenant friendly. She leans towards the landlords. And I know this from personal experience. You probably want to check with other landlord tenant attorneys about the bench officer who's going to be hearing our cases. On the mayor's questions regarding the survey, I think the answer, Mayor, will be in the crosstabs. In the crosstabs, there should be a distinction between homeowners, condo owners, and renters. And so the question about, are you suffering financially or in economic distress? The answer is not going to be in all those surveyed. The answer is going to be in the crosstabs on the tenants who responded to that question. And that's a very important part of looking at the survey. And then finally, I appreciate that the city does give rental assistance to our tenants. It maxes out at $1,000. You get a one-time grant of $1,000, which is not even a fraction of your monthly rent. So going forward, if we want to help with rental assistance as a way to try to keep enough of our tenants and property owners buoyant, we're going to need to revisit this $1,000 maximum. $1,000 for your average tenancy in West Hollywood is maybe half of the rent, and it's for one half of 1 month. And so I hope, and I see the city manager raising his hand, I hope he's going to say, we're already looking at that, at adjusting that figure. Thank you, Mayor.
Did you want to speak something, Paul?
Yeah, just real quickly. Right now, the average monthly rent in the city of West Hollywood is around $1,400. We do provide the rental assistance up to $1,000. We put a new significant cash infusion back into the program so that people can reapply and get additional grants. So that's happening now. Also, I see John Leonard's on the call. He's queuing up for the next item, but he may be able to answer some of the specific questions about the survey.
Yes, so the survey will cover the finer points that were mentioned by several council members. So we will be able to tell which renters and which homeowners have lost their jobs. There's also specific questions about which renters have been unable to pay rent, and also which renters have already used the city's rental rules that we're discussing tonight.
John, I think you want to say a representative percentage. We're not going to be identifying renters who can't pay their rent or renters who have accepted, right? I mean,
correct.
Just to sort of be clear, we're not, it's completely confidential and anonymous, and good.
Yeah, so it's a survey of approximately 500 individuals within the city. It's a statistically valid survey, but everything is confidential. But we will get a very good sense of the numbers within our city.
Great.
I have one final comment, and I'm going to be quiet. I just want to respond to the city manager. A studio in my building is $2,500. A one-bedroom in my building is $3,100. Maybe $1,400 a month rent is for those people under long-term rent-controlled leases, but the current market leases, where a lot of our young millennials are coming in, they haven't been in their apartments 15 or 20 years under rent control. They just got here in the last 3 to 5 years. They're paying those high market rates that are a lot higher than $1,400 a month. Those are the people in trouble. It's the young millennial workers. It's not the seniors. It's not the people who are under rent control who've been here 20 years. It's the young millennials who just got here in the last 3 to 5 years who are finding themselves unemployed and unable to secure work. Those are the people who are running the risk of displacement. And I just want to point that out. I mean, let's not rely on details from rents in the last decade. Let's rely on the reality of the market rates that are there now. Maybe they'll come down. Maybe the rents will come down. But a lot of the young people in our community are the ones who are the ones suffering right now under the pandemic economics.
Well, again, we're a backstop with the rental assistance program. There's other programs that are being offered to assist people as well. We'll bring back the numbers, and the council can consider other options as well.
Lauren, I think you had a question, and then Lindsay.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Just for John Leonard, Paul had mentioned something about a question about augmenting revenue. Can you explain that a little bit more? Are we talking about another tax?
We are potentially, there is a question about a sales tax increase,
That would be used for,
general fund purposes.
okay.
Lindsay? So, Lauren, I want to revisit one more time, Langer. So I believe the city had a policy when we were initially first providing domestic partnership, that if you signed a domestic partnership, you could move into your domestic partner's apartment. And I want to continue to press on this, because if you are a young person or an old person and you have a $3,000 apartment and you don't have a job, you should probably consider moving to somewhere that you can afford, because very quickly, if you defer your rent for a couple, 3 months, that's something that can ruin your credit for a decade or 7 years. And I just want to know if there's some possible way we could work within structures we already understand to allow people to become roommates in the long term. And maybe they become COVID cohabitants, and it allows them to move in together for the long term. And you don't have to answer now, and I'm not making a part of this motion and wouldn't consider that, but I just think that if we don't have all the tools available and we continue to suggest to people that they just defer paying their rent, we're keeping rent high because, downward pressure on people who are moving out is not happening. And we're also, I think, setting people up, young people who don't necessarily understand that, they'll just defer their rent and then they'll move out. Well, that will follow them for quite a long time. And we don't want to set that up either. So I'm just trying to advocate on behalf of some other ways for us to help people think this through besides just not paying their rent.
Thank you. I know there are provisions in the rent stabilization ordinance about what happens when a child is born, a child's adopted, there's a domestic partnership or a marriage. I'm not finding them on the spot at the moment, but we can look in that context as to what those existing terms are. And I hear what you're saying.
Thank you. So, Paul, I think you wanted something, and then I think someone should make a motion.
Yeah, and it's just a clarifying for the information on the average rents, the 1,400, it's actually $1,395. That's the average rent for the people who are utilizing the program. So while that may not be average rents in the city, for those people who are taking advantage of the program currently, their average rents are just slightly under $1,400. I'm sure there's going to be an additional wave of folks that are going to tap into those resources, and some of those numbers will change. And that's something we can bring back to council to re-examine different tiers of support.
All right. Someone wish to make this motion?
I'll make the motion as I stated earlier, with the extension to July 31st. And this would be to adopt this ordinance on an urgency basis.
Second.
All right, it's been made and seconded. City Clerk, Yvonne, would you please do a roll call? Thank you.
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to item 4B, which is a discussion of pending state legislation on housing development and land use. I think we have John Leonard on the line. I don't know if others are joining us.
So this was a item that was tabled at the last meeting and was brought forward to this meeting. Brian Eck from the Long Range Planning Department can provide a short presentation if council wishes to hear one. It was tabled because there were questions from council members. So we can either give a short presentation or just go straight to questions.
Lauren, I think you had some questions.
Yes.
Why don't you start, and if they're not automatically, then maybe we'll see the presentation.
Okay, actually, they're not questions, they're comments. So I don't know if you want to hear if there is public comment about this. I don't know.
Is there
Yes, we have two public speakers for this item.
So then let me just go back, and if Brian, if you could give us a 2 to 3 minute presentation on sort of the main themes and topics, and then we will hear from the public, and then we will hear comments from.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, Council
Thank you very
members.
much.
Yeah. The item before us is a summary and brief analysis of pending state legislation related to housing production and land use. Continuing a focus on housing production, members of the California State Legislature have introduced over 200 such bills this session. Generally, the introduced bills focus on the production of housing units, particularly the production of housing units to lower income households. And the report categorizes these bills into broad categories and identifies some emerging trends with the legislation, including modification of the state density bonus law, updates for accessory dwelling units. The report also includes suggested policy priorities based on the city's general plan and council direction on recent state and regional legislation, which includes a strong desire for the city to retain local control of its decision-making for these topics. Staff will use those priorities to evaluate bills as we work on with their sponsors to drive favorable outcomes for the city of West Hollywood. And finally, I should probably acknowledge that the city did receive a number of letters related to this item. Those were generally in response to a potential development project in the Norma Triangle. And just a few things regarding that before we hear comments. One is the potential project has not filed an application with the city as of yet. And while several of the bills that have been introduced are somewhat related to the potential project, none as written would facilitate the project or create new height or density provisions beyond what is already allowed by the state or locally. And last, the type of CEQA exemption that is offered in the staff report would not advocate to ease restrictions for any individual development project, including the project in question, but rather bolster community and neighborhood planning work in an effort to retain local control of decision-making. So thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Terrific. And now we shall hear from the public, if that's all right with you, Lauren Meister.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, we have our first public speaker, Mr. Jasper. Please state your full name, city of residence, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Charlie Jasper. I am a resident of West Hollywood. Mayor D'Amico, from my family to yours, may I offer our sincerest condolences. We, the people, want you to oppose streamlining CEQA requirements, as this is dangerous for both neighbors and those who would actually live in the proposed new buildings. CEQA is our only protection as neighbors and residents. We ask that City Council protect the quality of neighborhoods and neighborhoods' rights. We ask that you protect West Hollywood against overreach by Sacramento. This one-size-fits-all approach is not good governance. We don't understand why you would provide these exemptions for affordable housing developers and pass the buck to the state legislature, as opposed to protecting residents and neighbors. Shouldn't these developers face the same scrutiny as other developers? You will create a moral hazard for tenants of these buildings, as well as nearby residents, by giving 100% affordable housing developers these loopholes. We did not elect you to do that. We elected you to protect us. This does not make sense to me or any of us on the call. This is irresponsible and allows for overdevelopment, and in order to house the most vulnerable targeted populations, we owe it to them to give them a safe home. When you rush construction at the expense of safety, you create problems that don't need to exist. So do it right or don't do it at all. By streamlining CEQA and allowing developers to become negligent, you are putting us all at risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Ms. Orellana. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Martha Orellana. I've been living in West Hollywood for over 32 years, and this is the first time I've actually gotten to talk to all of you. So sorry for the losses that you're grieving, Amico, but I just also want to say that because you are the entire elected city council body, which represents West Hollywood residents, we really want you to oppose streamlining exemptions and removal of legal vulnerabilities related to CEQA. In other words, please don't take shortcuts that can put residents of the city at risk. Diminishing CEQA will cause significant negative environmental consequences for the entire city. It will affect your constituents whom you are elected to protect. Council members, please stand up against state legislature and protect our West Hollywood neighborhood, just like other cities are doing. Please oppose streamlining exemptions under item 4B. I don't understand why you wouldn't do it. It's in the best interest of our community. Thank you. Appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Ms. Orellana.
Mayor, we have one final speaker, Mr. Yusupov. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Yeah, this is Farhad Yusupov. I'm the resident of West Hollywood. Good evening, dear City Council members, and Mayor D'Amico, please accept my deepest condolences for your family's loss.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for the work you're doing. I'd like to ask the City Council to oppose the streamlining exemptions and removal of legal vulnerabilities related to the California Quality Act, known as CEQA. As we know, CEQA helps to ensure the fullest protection of the environment within the reasonable scope of the statutes. And one of the purposes of the California Environmental Quality Act is to prevent or minimize the damage to the environment through development of project alternatives and mitigation measures. Now, often the words streamlining and exemptions are used in political and legislative acts as a ways to lessen and remove regulations that are currently in place. This is the case where we do not want to lessen regulation or oversight, especially when it comes to protecting the environment. The impact on the environment is the same regardless of the types of the development projects. So please oppose further weakening of the California's environmental law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yusupov. Lauren?
Yes, I'd love to start. The reason that I had tabled this the last time it was on consent calendar is because I felt we definitely needed to have a discussion, and specifically about that particular bullet about CEQA. I feel that as a city that purports to be environmentally responsible, that we shouldn't be supporting legislation that diminishes it, especially when we don't know exactly what that legislation will be. It will be very different if there is a bill that comes out and the bill is brought forward to us and we get a chance to analyze the bill, but to just give a blanket support to me doesn't make any sense. So what I was going to suggest the last time when I thought we would put it on excluded consent was that that we just removed it. We just removed the bullet. We don't support, we don't oppose, we just, at this moment, until we see a bill coming out of the legislature, we just remain silent about it. The other thing I was going to do is to suggest that we do add one bullet to oppose incentives that result in demolition of existing rent stabilized housing. I think it's really important for us to, and as we've seen in the last discussion, that we protect our renters and that we make sure that the state is very clear about how we feel about our rent stabilized units, because what the state did when they initially came out with all of these housing bonuses, density bonuses, we lost a tremendous amount of rent stabilized housing until they fixed it with another bill, which we didn't put into effect till a year later. So I think it would be just safest to just remove the bullet point on the CEQA and to add a bullet to support rent stabilized housing. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Go ahead, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor. I heard from a lot of residents in West Hollywood about their concerns about what this item actually meant in terms of our advocacy. I don't think we just purport to be environmentally progressive. We heard earlier we've actually received awards for the work that we've done to be environmentally progressive in our planning. So I'm certain that's something that remains top of mind in terms of how we are thinking about our policy at the local level and what we're expecting at the state level. We are a member of the California League of Cities. We are a member of California Contract Cities Association. Both of those organizations have partnered with all of its member cities to make sure that local control is protected, and that and we have participated in those conversations equally. So I think that's something that we want to continue to do, is protect local control. When we've seen local control taken away with Costa-Hawkins and our rent stabilized housing, you know, those are things that were done by the state, and they haven't produced results that we're happy about here in the city. So I think we've tended in our advocacy at the state level to protect local control. I expect that we will continue to do that. I think that's what's important for us to be doing, is to protect our ability to make decisions at the local level about how we want to create the city. Thank you.
Councilmember Meister, you have another comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just would say that I don't understand how that bullet supports local control. We do have local control with CEQA. It's called overriding consideration. So we don't need this. We don't need to be supporting removing CEQA or changing CEQA to make it to basically make it less effective. Thank you.
So I'm noticing, and Yvonne, maybe you can check me on this, is John Heilman disappeared from our meeting?
He may have just stepped away for a moment.
Okay, but he's not having technical difficulties? I mean,
Oh, yes, I see. Let me let him back in. There was some issue.
All right,
So
there
he
we
may
go.
have some technical difficulties,
All
but
right,
he's coming back now.
Welcome back, Councilmember Heilman. Looks like you're back. I don't know, Lauren, if you wanted to make a motion. You seem to have the position that has a bit of a change versus what's been proposed. So if you wanted to make a motion, then we could discuss that.
Sure. I would make a motion that that we approve these priorities, with the exception of the bullet about supporting streamlining exemptions and removal of legal vulnerabilities related to CEQA, and that we just remain silent on that and just remove that bullet from our priorities. And then if my colleagues would agree that we add a bullet to say that we support legislation that protects rent stabilized units and oppose legislation that that does not protect rent stabilized units.
Mayor, I have a question for my colleague, Councilmember Meister. The second bullet that you just referenced, is there actually a piece of legislation, or that's just in theory?
Are we talking the one that I'm adding?
Yeah, the second one. Yeah.
Yeah. None of these are necessarily based on specific legislation, just like the CEQA one is not based on anything specific that's come before us. So
these are just our priorities.
These are our priorities. So I think that if we're going to tell Sacramento what our priorities are, that's definitely one of them, or I hope it is.
Is there a second for that? I'm happy.
You know, I want to say, Councilmember Meister, I support you on the first bullet that you mentioned. The second one, I'm hesitant, just for the reasons of local control that Mayor Pro Tem Horvath described. I mean, there may be situations, and we've seen them in the past, where we have opted to redevelop on properties where there are rent-controlled units, with the guarantee that those tenants that are displaced temporarily be allowed back in the new development, and we've increased our housing stock. So I'd hate to give up that opportunity to do something that's narrowly tailored for our city, meaning we're going to remove rental housing stock, that we guarantee that those tenants have first right of refusal to come back in the new units while we simultaneously increase affordable housing. So I'm with you on the first one. The second one, I have some hesitance for the reasons stated.
So
what if I change that to that we support legislation that protects rent stabilized, as opposed to the negative?
Well, yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
All right.
And
we
then
have a
remove
motion
that
and a
bullet
second
about
to remove the bullet about CEQA and to add one about supporting rent stabilized housing. Any further comments on our priorities for the next year? I would just add that it's my understanding from what Assemblymember Bloom just said, and from what I've been reading and discussing with Helene, is that if it doesn't have COVID in its title, it's not getting picked up in the near future. So I appreciate that we are being very clear about our priorities, but it's my sense that none of those 200 and some bills that Ryan Eck mentioned are going anywhere. But if they do, I'm sure we want to have our priorities straight. And so with that, Yvonne, can you take a roll call vote, please?
I know that Councilmember Meister motioned. Was there a second?
Yes, or John seconded, either one. Yes.
Okay.
John Duran, for those of you not watching from home. Yes.
Got it. Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Terrific. We are putting 4C on a future agenda. Did we say to a time certain? I guess it doesn't matter. You all will figure that out. Item 5A has gone to our consent calendar, and item 5B is an initiative measure proposing an ordinance to the City of West Hollywood modifying the West Hollywood Cannabis Ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor. I will give a brief staff report, and Lauren Langer and John Leonard are here to answer questions specific to the cannabis ordinance. So on February 7th, the City Clerk's Office received a notice of intent to circulate a petition to propose an ordinance which would modify the current West Hollywood Cannabis Ordinance by consolidating license categories and authorizing adult use and medical use cannabis businesses to sell cannabis for both medical and adult use, and authorizing all licensed cannabis consumption businesses to be licensed for all types of cannabis consumption, as well as amending licensing and operating requirements to our ordinance. On March 24th, we received the petitions, and they were able to collect 3,168 signatures. They only needed 2,829, so therefore the petition was deemed sufficient. So the next step is for me to bring an item to council for us to discuss the next steps, which would be either adopting the ordinance without alteration or requesting that it be brought back 10 days from now at a special meeting. Or you can submit the ordinance without alteration to the voters, and that would be on the ballot for the November 3rd election. Or you can request a report, and that would need to be done within 30 days. And that report, what it would be comprised of is in the staff report. I am available for questions, as well as Assistant City Attorney Langer and John Leonard.
All right, how many speakers do we have, Yvonne?
We have one.
We have one speaker. Should we hear from the speaker and then ask questions, or did we want to ask questions first? How about if we hear from the speaker if that person is teed up?
We will have our speaker now. You have 2 minutes, and please mute your other devices.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I am Sarah Armstrong, the Director of Industry Affairs for Americans for Safe Access. And I hope that tonight you will make the decision to help the original shops remain open. Of course, one of these is LAPCG, where I've shopped since it opened in 2005. And its operator, Don Duncan, I've known since that time. These are uncertain times, and we don't know if the people who won new licenses will be able to open or how long they'll be able to stay open should things not resolve themselves and allow the city to reopen. LAPCG in particular has a long history of honorable operation, being very, very kind to its patients and consumers, and is a credit to the community. If the city can find a way for them to remain open, it would mean so much to me and so much to many other people. I want to thank Safe Access and allow LAPCG and others, particularly LAPCG, whose nickname is the House of Compassion, the House of Americans for Safe Access, the nation's oldest national patient advocacy organization. Thank you for your time. I hope you are all well and remain safe.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for John or Lauren? John Duran.
Mayor, I'd like to try to do a motion just because I'm cognizant of the time and my computer's running out of energy too. So I don't want to go dark on y'all. I'd like to move recommendation number 4, that we order a report pursuant to section 9212 of the California Elections Code to be presented at the City Council meeting of June the 1st, 2020, analyzing all the various impacts, fiscal impact, internal consistency with our general and specific plans, land use, funding for infrastructure, and all the other items in terms of impacts that are suggested in the staff report. That'd be my motion.
I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded. Are there comments? Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to add, I was approached by some of the signature gatherers who participated in this effort.
Not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your.
While I was in line to vote in March, and they were pretty aggressive with misinformation to try and solicit signatures from folks. And I advised them that the information they were sharing was not accurate. They said it anyway, and they were, like I said, quite aggressive with people who were in line. I know that we also received complaints about signature gatherers participating in this activity while the COVID emergency was underway, and people were concerned and scared, quite frankly, of people participating. So I would like to include in the analysis in the report that comes back, to the extent that it's possible, exploring the legality of using such tactics, including misinformation, in order to solicit signatures for these efforts. I know that this is not the only signature gathering effort that has happened or likely will happen in the future. And I think it would be helpful for us to know what kind of tactics are allowed and whether there are any consequences for those tactics being used. Thanks.
Without objection, is the seconder?
Oh, no, I have a question.
Yes, no, I'm just saying that we can, happy if they study that as well.
Should we consider adding the initiative where the signature gatherers actually followed CDC and LA County regulations and didn't collect signatures after the emergency period? Can we consider putting that initiative on the ballot when this comes back to us? Or at least have a discussion about it when it comes back?
From a Brown Act perspective, I would recommend that, because that, I know you got correspondence on that topic. It's not technically part of this agenda item tonight, but if the council direction is going to be to bring a report back on June 1st, we could also agendize an item to have that requested discussion as well.
I would like that if we can do that.
Okay.
I want to make sure I understand. So this is on June 1st. There would be a second item looking at whether signatures gathered after the stay-at-home emergency ordinance was put in place, whether those signatures are valid?
No, there was another initiative where signatures were being gathered.
I see.
They stopped gathering signatures because of COVID-19. So my question to the city attorney is, can we put that on an item when it comes back to us to consider putting that initiative on the ballot if we do put
Got it.
the other one on the ballot?
Glad I asked. Thank you.
And if anyone's unclear what we're talking about, there's some correspondence posted with this agenda item 5B. I believe it's the correspondence that came on April 30th. And it requests the council to put a second initiative on the ballot because those proponents were unable to get signatures due to the COVID emergency. So all we're saying is, because that's not technically on your agenda tonight, when you have this conversation on the cannabis initiative, you could agendize a second item to talk about that request.
Got it.
Mayor, before
Councilmember Heilman. Oh, I'm sorry. Yvonne had something, but.
No, go ahead, Yvonne.
After Councilmember Heilman, there are two people that have called in during the conversation. So if we could allow them to speak before the final vote, that would be great.
Do you want to just take those now, Mayor, and then I can do my comment?
Absolutely. If you're ready, Yvonne, are you ready? Take your time.
Yeah. Yes, I'm ready. Speaker, you are on the line. If you want to provide public comment for item 5B, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you.
And please turn off your other devices.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
You have 1 minute and 45 seconds.
They hung up. So we have another.
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. I appreciate being here to give you my voice and the voice of the people in this neighborhood. My name is Thomas Sobek, and I've lived here since 2001. And my first comment is I caught the last councilman speaking, and I want you to know that I spent the last 2 days out here going around the neighborhood with a mask on, of course, and every conceivable person I ran into is against this project. So I strongly believe that what you just said about harassment is not true and a fabrication. The facts are no one wants this, especially after what I experienced the last 2 days in the neighborhood. You guys violated CEQA. You've got a housing unit that, you know, if it is low-income housing, supportive law 506-71514 states that it can be, you know, mentally ill, convicts, sex violation people, which I understand they need a place to go. But this is the wrong area due to the fact that you have a school a block away. Yeah, 1 block. Failure on your part creates a detrimental effect on your end and the developer open to lawsuits. And what would Jane Dobrin say if she was here in front of you right now? Hell is breaking loose.
Thank you, sir. Your 2 minutes.
The traffic? Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, there is one other person, and this will be our last speaker.
Okay.
Hi, you are here to speak on item 5B. Caller, are you here to speak on item 5B? Okay. We must have lost that person. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Yvonne. So Councilmember Heilman, are you with us? Did we lose him? Does he need to be let back in?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, good. I believe you had a comment, and then we will.
I'm going to support the motion to do a study over the next 30 days and bring it back. I think that we also have the option of putting our own ordinance on the ballot or adopting an ordinance. I think what we're faced with here, and I think we all know it, is that we have the people who were granted marijuana licenses who are very happy about the process, and our existing cannabis dispensaries who were medicinal dispensaries who we temporarily allowed to have adult use licenses, and they're upset about the fact that they didn't get those licenses. So this initiative was brought forward by who were unsuccessful or were not successful in getting the kind of licenses that they want. I think everything has changed as a result of the current crisis. And maybe there is an opportunity within the next month for us to come up with some kind of compromise. And I hope that in the next 30 days, we're exploring those options with all of the parties to see if there's a way to resolve this. Because frankly, I think most of the voters do not want to deal with this issue. They're focused on much more important things. And we as a council should be more focused on those important things as well. So if we can do something in the next 30 days, that's great. If not, we're likely going to have to put this on the ballot. But I support the motion that my colleague John Duran has brought forth.
All right. With that, are there any more comments? I believe we had a motion and a second by me.
Does that motion include, okay.
Yeah, no, please. Then there was a request to put the additional information in a separate item about an additional ballot initiative. And we can vote on that separately if there's not an agreement to have that discussion, but I have the sense that we're going to have this report and we're going to have a freewheeling discussion anyway. So we might as well put everything we want to talk about on an agenda, and then under the adept leadership of the future mayor, we'll have that discussion.
I think, Mayor, I think Mayor Pro Tem Horvath asked us to also investigate any issues regarding aggressive signature gathering, which I have no problem with including that as part of the report. And regarding another proposed initiative coming out of the council, I think we have until the end of the summer to do that. I'd want to see it before I would support or oppose it. So,
right.
Certainly.
Yeah. So I guess what I was sort of suggesting to you, John Duran, and to everyone was that, you know, this should be like we want to make sure we can just have a freewheeling discussion, city attorney. And so if there are items that's this report or separate items that need to be agendized, we want to make sure we're covering the landscape of cannabis questions before we vote on this initiative. It looks like John Leonard has a question.
I was just going to say that we haven't presented a cannabis update in a number of months, so we can provide that as a part of this so that the council has the full information on the cannabis landscape at this point.
Oh my God, another 3-hour discussion. I don't know.
Well, it may be the case, but you know, we're either going to cover it all or we're going to.
Yeah, I have to agree with Councilmember Heilman's comments about we have so many pressing issues to deal with in the middle of a pandemic, and we'll give it its just due, but we got other stuff to do too.
Yes. All right. Yvonne, would you run us through a vote? There you are in the bottom left corner.
Yes, Councilmember Duran.
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman.
Aye.
Councilmember Meister.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right, there are 2 excluded consent calendar items. Item 2I, which was about future events in the city. City manager, was this going to be yours or was David going to join us?
I told David I would try to handle it. This is basically a staff report that shows a list of events that are scheduled up until the end of this calendar year. One of the events that is not on there is the budgeting and rescheduling for LA Pride in September.
And I think one of the things we had, as a council, asked for David to produce was the amount of savings between March and June 2020, the amount of savings should we defer events between March and December 2020, and the amount of savings should we defer events from March 2020 to June 2021. I don't know if you want to go through those figures for the public.
Yeah, I'm pulling that up now.
Mayor, while the city manager is pulling that up, my understanding from this item was that this was an update and a receive and file, and that our staff was going to come back to us at a subsequent meeting with recommendations for those items that, or those events that we might want to just simply cancel or postpone indefinitely. But that was my understanding from reading the item.
I think that's right, though. I think there has been some members of the community that wanted us to take some action so that they could begin to plan for themselves, because we're like the landlords and like everyone else, we're leaving some people in the lurch as time is passing by. So I'm just throwing that out there as well. That's what I've heard in the since we've started discussing this and put it on our agenda for this time.
So if the council does want to, I think at a minimum, it's reasonable to look at the major events up to December, both from a health and safety perspective and also an economic perspective, as we go into a deep dive on next year's budget with some initial fiscal challenges. If we were to cancel the major events going up through December 30th, and the two big events would be obviously LA Pride at $3 million and Halloween at $2.4 million. There are other events as well, but you know, the cost of those events would be in the neighborhood of $6 million.
Paul, I really think it's unlikely that those events are going to be safe in the fall. I think we're probably still going to be looking at social distancing. So I think we have no choice at this point to be at least looking at canceling those. You're going to have to come back to us at a subsequent meeting. I would say that with respect to Halloween, there are going to be people on the street no matter what. So we're probably going to look at some kind of additional law enforcement costs, even if we cancel the official city-sponsored event. We will still have additional people on our streets and sidewalks unless we're still in the, you know, the heat of the pandemic, or if there's another outbreak. So there, we won't save all of the money, but we'll save some of it.
Yeah, my take, if it's a non-programmed event and we are saying that we're not going to shut down the street and that we're going to do things differently, it would be significantly less money. But you're right that there's still going to be some cost, and I would agree that come fall we're going to continue the social distancing. There's going to be major a potential for a major spike, and we just don't want to be contributors to that.
Lauren, Lindsay, John Duran.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with making the decision to cancel major events through December 31st. And but if we can't do it tonight, and it has to be at the next meeting, but I think, you know, you're going into budget meetings. It's important for us to know this.
Yeah, and as I was saying during some of the informal conversations, this ultimately makes my job easier because we were probably going to come back and recommend that we cancel these, both again because of the health crisis, but also the fiscal challenges.
So Paul, would you prefer that is it possible for us to make that decision tonight? And if it is, would you prefer we just do that tonight going into those budget conversations?
If you're giving me guidance that there's a consensus that as I'm preparing the budget that you're comfortable with the canceling of these events, recognizing as Councilmember Heilman mentioned that we will still have some additional public safety costs, but not in the neighborhood of $2.4 million that we see, then that's how I'll present the budget.
And that's through the end of 2020.
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to chime in on Halloween. I think that I think it's probably prudent to cancel the notion of a huge Halloween event like we've had every year with 500,000 people. However, I think the spirit of Halloween is going to happen. Whether we approve it or disapprove it, it doesn't matter. People are going to get dressed up and they're going to want to go out on Halloween night as they have for 50 years. I don't know where we're all going to be come September. It may be an opportunity for us to think about Halloween moving into a lot of our bars and nightclubs with proper social distancing. I think we need to give city managers some flexibility. But the reality is we don't want people spilling out off of Santa Monica Boulevard into the traffic lanes. That was the reason we created Halloween as an official event in the first place, was to avoid having that contact between automobiles and people dressed up in Halloween costumes. But we may want to look at if in fact our bars and nightclubs are able to accommodate, we may be moving Halloween indoors with proper social distancing, proper occupancy, and maybe an opportunity to figure out how to, I don't want to say contain Halloween, but at least have it happen internally rather than out on the boulevard.
And I would say that this decision or this direction in terms of budgeting doesn't preclude us from planning things in September to happen in October or in August. It just gives additional flexibility to the incoming mayor and the mayor pro tem. And, as I've said to Paul in the last weeks of discussion, that I'm happy to be the guy leaving who rips the Band-Aid and says we're not doing any of this, and makes it easier for Lindsay to be the woman who saved Halloween come September, because I just think our budget, the complications ahead are extraordinary, and we need to, just seems to me we can always plan things, but if we're tying up $7 million between now and December, that people who want their rent paid or people who need food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we should just, as I said, rip the Band-Aid. So somehow maybe I'll craft this language, which is that we'll give direction to the city manager to defund these events and come back with an item that cancels them, and defund them in your budget projections and cancel them officially in a future event.
We'll do that as part of the budget resolution and the work program for next year.
Okay. Do we need to have a second to that, or that'll just be our receive and file direction? I guess that's our receive and file direction. All right.
The file is okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And now our last item on tonight's agenda is item 2P. I was the one that pulled that item. I wanted to ask John Duran a couple of questions. It's about learning lessons from the pandemic, and it's my memory and the current state that one of the lessons we learned from the pandemic is to include people with AIDS on panels when you talk about people with AIDS. And I just noticed that on this panel, there's not a single person with AIDS, there's not a single person with COVID, there's not a single person who had COVID and AIDS, and yet we're talking about what lessons we're going to learn from that. And I wanted to ask you if you could expand that panel to include people who could talk about their personal experience I know, given that there are 130 people diagnosed in our city and something like 20% of our population has HIV, that there's probably 25 people with HIV who have COVID that you could ask them to participate. This person is not available, but I'm sure there are others who would be happy to speak of their experience and on their behalf. And Keith is over there waving in the background. He's another one who has HIV and COVID and could perhaps speak about his experience. But really, more generally, I'm just concerned, John, that we're starting off and the city is heading off in the direction of excluding the very people that are affected by these diseases in this discussion.
Well, I want to say this panel is not meant to be the end all. There can be very many panels. In fact, the whole point of public education is to have many points of view presented. What I wanted to focus on were those individuals from multiple disciplines that went through the last pandemic. Michael Gottlieb being one of the co-founders of HIV, and obviously somebody who's well in tune and in weekly contact with Anthony Fauci. If I could get Fauci to come to West Hollywood, I would do that. I got the next best thing, somebody who's talking to Fauci every week. Diane Abbott being an attorney who was very involved with MECLA and one of the co-founders of AIDS Project Los Angeles as the first board chair. She's the one that got John Vandekamp to do the orphan bill to create a mini FDA here in the state of California. And I think that sort of expertise is the sort of thing we need to hear about. I didn't want to just make it about medical, though. I wanted to expand it to issues beyond that. That's why I asked a member of the clergy, Rabbi Eger, to be part of that, and Karen Oakham as a journalist. And finally, David Kessler. If you don't know David, he was one of the founders of Project Angel Food, somebody that worked with Marianne Williamson in developing a lot of the early programming around that. He was the founder of Progressive Nursing Services. He was a nurse on the front lines of the last pandemic, and now he's gone on to become an author who's written extensively about death and dying. I don't foresee any reason why we couldn't have other panels. And obviously, I'd love to have one with Deborah Burr, Barbara Ferrer from our LA County Department of Public Health. But at the same time this is all happening, they're all very busy handling a crisis. So I don't know how likely it is to get any of those people. I was going to do this on my own anyway, using my own social media platforms. And speaking to Lisa Balsante, she said, you should probably let the city have a crack at televising this to help get the word out. I think there's many different ideas in terms of panels that we could have around COVID. I just wanted to launch one with a bunch of 60 and 70-year-olds who are still around, who were at the forefront of the last pandemic. Do we have the ability to include other points of view about the current one? Yes, but we don't have to do it all in this one panel. I'm hoping that as time goes forward, there'll be multiple panels. And any of my colleagues that want to introduce a panel of experts on any angle of COVID, I'll support you in doing that. These are just the experts that I knew, that I checked their availability to see if they were willing. And the 5 of them said yes. I don't know, to some degree, I just want to get it out and launched. And if we want to have additional voices with additional perspectives, no reason we couldn't do a panel every month, as far as I'm concerned.
Any other comments?
I don't think we need a panel every month, but I do think that if the point of having the panel is to talk about the intersection and lessons learned, then we should have people who are able to speak to that. So I
wasn't planning on an intersection with COVID. That's not the item. The item is about lessons learned from the last pandemic.
If all you're trying to do is talk about what happened during AIDS, HIV and AIDS crisis in West Hollywood, to me, that's different. I saw in the report mention of COVID-19, so I thought that was your intention to talk about that. But if it's not your intention and you're having a panel on AIDS and HIV in West Hollywood, that's not how I read the report. And I think
Yeah,
that's different.
I'm happy to withdraw the item. I'm just going to do this on my own social media platforms. I just wanted to give the city an opportunity to host it, but the city doesn't have to sponsor it. I can just do it on my own Zoom.
I will
John,
support
Duran, or Lauren. Yes, either one.
support the item.
I think having an item like this is a good thing. I think the concerns that have been raised is about who the panelists are and whether we could expand and add additional panelists who might provide a different perspective or an additional perspective. And I certainly support that. So I hope that Councilmember Duran will think about that as he's finalizing the speakers. But I think having this kind of panel, it's the kind of thing that we do all the time in the city. I have no objection to doing it. But I support my colleagues who also believe that we should have a more expansive group of people participating and sharing their perspective on how the former epidemic, which we're still living with, impacts what we're dealing with right now and influences our understanding of what's happening right now.
So it sounds like there is interest in doing this panel. If you expand it, there's people who want to vote for it. If you don't want to expand it, there's probably people who want to vote for it. So it's up to you to make a motion. And
you want to give me names, and I'm happy to consider them, putting them on a panel. I don't want a panel with 12 people, because then we get none of the depth of the expertise that I'm after. I mean, we've got Michael Gottlieb willing to do a panel with us, David Kessler. I mean, these are some heavyweights that I think are really important. If you want to include another name that you think is important, sure, give me his or her name. I'm happy to toss them on, but I'm hoping that people don't see this as the one and only panel we need to have. We can have multiple panels, especially since Lauren and I introduced an item tonight about more of these meetings happening online with Zoom and FaceTime. Let's do them, but let's not overly complicate it either. So I guess I'll say support the item, give me names. You got people you want to throw at me, give me names. Let's see if we can put something together, but let's not overly complicate it.
Second motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second to not overly complicate this panel and to, I guess we could ask David Juni or Human Services to help identify people. I mean, I don't want to, it's not my job, and I don't know if my colleagues want to provide you names of people either, but I guess that's the motion.
Can you repeat who made the motion and who seconded it? I'm sorry.
I guess I made it, Lauren Meister. Yeah.
John, since clearly I'm not understanding your intention, can you explain to me, you see this panel as a panel on lessons learned from the AIDS and HIV pandemic?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So it's not about COVID at all.
Well, by extension, and what can be exported to the COVID pandemic that's currently existing. Problem is, we don't have any real experts on COVID yet. It's only been with us for 3.5 months. I mean, we're going to develop experts in the upcoming future. I think that's true. And I know that, at least a handful of people who've had COVID, including the mayor and others. I just don't know what direction we want to go in terms of this panel. My idea was just to have a 1.5 hour discussion with 6 people, and I'm sure it's not the first and last panel. We can have other panels.
Perhaps you could ask Cedars-Sinai to provide an expert on treating people with COVID from their infectious disease department. I would guess that we could get some assistance in identifying someone.
Okay.
All right, so are we clear about what the motion is? And City Clerk, do you want to take a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
I don't think your voice was heard, Lindsay.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor D'Amico?
No.
The motion passes, noting the no vote of Mayor D'Amico.
All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 18th at 6:30 p.m.
May
via
I-
teleconference.
Mayor?
Yes.
Paul would like to talk about the next meeting, the scheduling for the next meeting.
Can I say something quickly, Paul?
Yes, of course. Yes,
Yes,
I didn't mean to skip over
I
Councilmember
just wanted to
comments.
say that May is Older Americans Month, and May 15th is National Senior Fraud Awareness Day. So for anyone who's up, now you know.
So we usually try to keep the installation night as light as possible. We do have a couple pressing items. One was the park construction project that we're carrying over to the next meeting. If it works for everybody's calendar, I recommend that we start the closed session at 5 and the regular session at 5:30 to get to the ceremonial aspect for the incoming mayor, hopefully by 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock.
Well, isn't that the first thing on the agenda? Doesn't it happen quick? The ceremonial part, and then I guess.
Oh,
when we
I'm
finish the
sorry.
meeting-
Yeah, and I guess the installation happens at the beginning, but or I know that there's going to be a post event too, so just trying to get the meeting over with earlier, as early as possible.
I'm all good. 5 o'clock works for me. Does 5 o'clock not work for anyone? Looks like you have your 5 o'clock, Paul. All right.
Mayor, if I
Yes.
may add a couple bits of good news. I just want to acknowledge WeHome, the West Hollywood Municipal Employees Association, made a significant donation to Project Angel Food to help provide a lifeline for many in our community during the COVID-19 crisis. So I just wanted to thank them for their generosity and support of our community in yet another way. And I also wanted to acknowledge 4 sheriff's deputies who responded to a rescue call regarding a woman choking. They are receiving life-saving commendations from the Sheriff's Department. I just wanted to acknowledge them here tonight. Deputy Vukazic, Deputy Vega, Deputy Munoz, and Deputy Arembolo. Their contributions during this crisis are certainly appreciated, but especially for that woman whose life was saved, and we thank them for the work that they do. Just a little bit of good news to end the evening.
Yes, that's terrific. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to do good news too then. Kevin Grant Spencer and Travis Garcia are 2 guys who used to be part of the nightlife of the city of West Hollywood, now work for high-tech companies. They launched a program called WeHo Nights In to raise money for bartenders, barbacks, drag performers, valet parkers, anybody associated with the WeHo nightlife. And in 2.5 weeks, these guys raised $25,000 off their website, which is significant. They have had 200 applications from bartenders, servers, valets. They've now expanded their website for Spanish language, given that a lot of people behind the scenes at the bars use Spanish as their primary language. And now they are pulling in bar owners to help supplement their efforts. If you're listening at home and you are somebody who worked for one of our bars or nightclubs on Santa Monica Boulevard and you need help, reach out to the guys. They're able to assist. They've got 200 of your friends already asking for help. I'm sure there are more out there. Thank you to Travis and Kevin Grant Spencer.
That's amazing. All right, now can I adjourn this meeting? All right, we are adjourned to Monday, May 18th. Thank you all very much. We'll see you at 5 p.m. For the closed session and 5:30 for the open session.
Thank you,
all
Mayor.
very much.